going on that you and I have talked about. We've talked at times like for 2 hours, and of course now we should do this live stream to bring it to public. What do we think? Of course, I'm not going to be totally straightforward in my opinions because I work in the media. But okay, so John, first of all, what are you up to? Okay, you're up to a million things.
Well, honestly, it's all focused on my podcast, WordBalloon, which I do on my YouTube channel and I do on audio. I've been doing it for 18 years. It started off as a kind of a side gig. And I don't know, in the last 5 years or so, it's become much more important. As you know, we worked together in radio, and I got downsized right at the start of COVID. But I took a chance and I wanted to see how things are just purely on the digital platform. And I have to say, so far, so good. I mean, always things could be better, but my audience is expanding. And it's great. WordBalloon is if you don't know who I am, WordBalloon is a pop culture interview show, primarily in nerd culture. So Star Wars, Star Trek, Westerns, horror, certainly science fiction. Fantasy. I like talking about that stuff. I've enjoyed it. It's been my pursuit as far as my entertainment. And I feel like now there's a forum to talk about it on digital. It's so weird, Margaret, as the digital platform expands and more opportunities are there, it feels like broadcast television and radio contract. And really not just television, but radio as well. And it really bums me out because when I was a really little kid, there were really different forms of radio going on. I remember the CBS Radio Mystery Theater was on 7 nights a week doing an hour of audio drama. Amazing talk shows like Larry King overnight and these incredibly intense interviews and interesting subjects and even good conversation between callers and the host. And, God, things have gotten so tribal. Talk radio still exists, but it's either you're in one camp or another, which is a shame. Audio drama is gone from, it's funny, BBM, our old radio station, still plays an hour of it at midnight every night. But it just feels like, again, that the choices on broadcasting have changed. We'll get into local TV whenever you want. But I mean, my God, I was telling you last night, in fact, it's the Cliff Note version is, all right, for local TV, it's local news, infomercials, and judge shows, it seems. That's pretty much it. And it's like, man, I'm so bummed. Reruns don't have a place, it seems, on broadcast television anymore. Very, very weird. So yeah, I think it's an interesting time right now.
Okay, why do you? Because that CW has reruns. Okay, so why do you think that is?
Well, that's true. That's a good point. I think honestly, it's a combination of things. I think attention spans. I think hour-long television, with very few exceptions. I mean, God, I know our local ABC affiliate buries what a few syndicated reruns of hour-long television in the overnight hours. I don't get it. I don't know. I really don't understand. I mean, we have things, and then you go to the digital channels you can get with a digital antenna, like MeTV, Antenna TV, and those things.
Can you still get that?
Yeah, and Nickelodeon, I suppose, or Nick at Night, things like that. Everything seems to have shifted to that digital platform rather than being over the air. I forgot sports, of course, is still a thing on local broadcasting to a degree, although you got to pay for it. I mean, especially here in Chicago, you better have cable or satellite, or you're not going to see Cubs games or White Sox games, or thank God Bears games still happen every Sunday. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. Bulls, obviously, some of them are on over the air, some of them aren't. It's so weird. I guess it's money. They're getting more money from these other, the intellectual properties are getting more money from cable companies, streaming or whatever. But I don't know. And also that local TV and local radio don't get more creative. It's just same old.
Yeah, let's go into that. Well, first of all, what you're talking about, we are in the middle of. So I just read this biography of Gutenberg. And I'm sure back then in the 16th and 15th century, they're like, oh my gosh, what's going on? Especially the 16th century. And we are in the middle of a change. So like in 20 years, people are going to look back and be like, why are all these people talking about it? They're so self-conscious about the changes. Of course, there's no cable or whatever.
Maybe you're right. I think we are in a a media shift, and that's interesting. You're right. So do you think the old monks and clerics went on strike because of Gutenberg? And unfair, don't use the printing press, man. What are you doing? You're putting people out of work. All these poor calligraphers.
No, but it was a slow takeover because based on everybody should read something about that. But no, basically it started out with religious items and then it went to books, but it was a very slow start, and it started in Germany, it spread to Italy and so forth. But, also if you look at, okay, I always think about the late 19th century because there was a lot of development in terms of manufacturing, in terms of wealth, in terms of media, et cetera. And think about back then. So people were also in the middle of that, like, hey, what's going on? Wait, what's going on with the newspapers and the change of tone? And then think about early radio, same thing. First, there were hobbyists and then it became more mainstream.
Yeah.
So when people were in it, they were probably looking around thinking, I can't believe what's going on. We're going to be out of business. So do you think that we are like that? Maybe you're being too harshly critical?
Well, the only thing is that with the invention of radio and television at the start, all you needed to do was buy a set and you had access. And I think now there really is this kind of economic divide. I do think, some of the internet providers are trying to make internet more readily available to everyone. I mean, I keep getting those Google ads. Sure, one might have ran on our YouTube conversation right now that they're building more free broadband in your area and things. But I don't know. I really, again, I think the great thing about radio, especially, God, think about the Depression when people could build a crystal set and still be connected to the world if they needed to be. And I just that really, it bothers me. And also, I think, and again, maybe you're right. Maybe I'm not really paying attention to really looking at history broadly, but the tribalism really bothers me. And
okay, how would you define that?
The tribalism? Yeah. Well, it's pretty basic. I mean, my God, if you want political talk, you either go to a conservative show or a liberal show. You don't really. I mean, there is no middle. Like Keith Olbermann said this on his podcast. To suggest there is a middle ground is ridiculous. We all have opinions. And that's fine. Right. But at least it seemed possible to have a presentation of ideas and have a reasonable debate. I think public television still does that. I think public radio still does that. I don't know if they reach everybody because, again, I think the listening and habits and viewing habits are, I want to hear my opinions reflected back on me rather than a real curiosity of, well, what does everybody think about this? And forgive the generalization, because I'm sure there are people that seek out all sides and want to make their own minds up. But a lot of people too just want, it's still kind of passive where the information is coming to you and they don't want to, they don't want to think. They want it served to them.
Well, it's interesting because I remember my dad, who was born at the beginning of radio, and then when he died, it was really when the internet was totally taking off. I mean, it was beyond that. It was saturated. But I remember he told me that there used to be public intellectuals, and now you don't see that as much. He meant now, like 10 years ago, you don't see that as much. What do you think about that?
I agree. God, the great talk shows like Johnny Carson and the like would have, when it was a 2-hour show, they would have authors, Calvin Trillin and Harlan Ellison, Gore Vidal, William Buckley, to throw a conservative name in there to balance some of the liberal names I've thrown out there. But yeah, I think I think we were better read. And again, because there were less media options. I mean, you probably remember too. I remember riding the L, and if it was the evening, everybody had the newspapers up, man. And not only that, but we had evening editions of the newspapers. They weren't running this morning's news. I mean, that's, and God, look at newspapers now. They went from being as thick as a phone book to a pamphlet now. God,
now we can go online. We can go online and I read stuff in German, Spanish, French, Japanese, English, from all over, different views.
But you have to fight the algorithms of the internet to find other opinions. I mean, and other things that, my one uncle lived to his late 80s. And in the last 10 years of his life, he would sit in his easy chair and read the newspaper. And he was exposed to all these different ideas and thoughts. And he's like, this is the best value of entertainment. And he's like, this 50-cent thing every day. And I was amazed because this was not a well-educated man, but he just really got a glimpse of the world and a bunch of different views. And it's, again, I mean, I hear you and I do the same thing. I seek out things online, but I do know in the back of my head that the algorithms are, directing me to 24 Star Trek articles versus, hey, here's another point of view that you don't agree with, but they might have some valid thoughts.
But one way to get different points of view is Twitter. I know a lot of people don't like Twitter, which is now called X. I like Twitter X because I follow so many different kinds of people that there'll be one topic and one guy will hate so-and-so, one guy will like so-and-so, one guy will just be abstract about it. I'm saying guy in a general term because they're also women, so that's a good way. But I know people like to listen to their own opinions.
Yeah. And I listen, I really am disappointed with the changes that Elon Musk continues to make. It seems like he wants to make this so much more complicated than what Twitter was. I always preferred Twitter to Facebook as well. I appreciated the brevity of it. And even before they doubled the character count, and even when it was like 150 or whatever it was originally, I like that. I kind of like the short, pithy, whatever. And I've always used social media to share not only my personal opinions, but be like, hey, I just saw this documentary. This is great. Watch it. I just read this book. I just read this article, whatever. This is a great song. This is a great interview clip. And, I was always aware of, the negative stuff on message boards and Twitter and Facebook and stuff. It does seem like the hate is amped up, and it's too bad. And again, I point to this tribalism, and also, I mean, the most innocent subjects. And in fact, I was watching a couple of my friends on YouTube discuss this, that it's, I may not like the new versions of Star Trek. And the people that do not only disagree with me, but they are hurt by my contradictory opinion. If you don't like what I like, well, then you don't like me. And it's like, hey, man, no, relax. I like what you like. It's okay. But I might comment that, well, I like older Star Trek more than I like new Star Trek. But yeah, I mean, I have gotten some very emails and messages like, hey, I like it. Shut up. And it's like, no, I'm not going to shut up, but go on and like it. It's
okay. But one thing about digital is that it has expanded the audience. So for instance, when you're offline, you can choose the people you talk to. So I can talk to you. There's some other people I can talk to. I may not agree with them. We don't care. So then you can edit more who you talk to. But online, you have like 1,000 people looking at what you're saying, and you can't edit them out necessarily.
No, and that's okay. I mean, I like the public square idea of social media. I do think there are people that take advantage of it and weaponize it, demonize it, their talk, and there are people that attack others, and that's unnecessary, and it's unfortunate because it just, when it was brand new, it felt more freer, and I mean, there were always cranks, but it just felt like, hey, this is great. I'm in Chicago, you're in Australia, and we're having this conversation online. That's cool. And I mean, my God, for my podcast to find my international audience, I've been telling you, I've got my fans and also business partners in Dublin, in Ireland, and that's wonderful. And it's so surprisingly positive that these people are wasting their time listening to my BS. I mean, come on, that's great.
Well, it's okay. It's not BS. I really like it, although I don't understand some of what you're talking about. But it is one of the best podcasts, probably my favorite podcast. And live.
That's ridiculously nice, Margaret. Truly, it means a lot. Thank you, because but it's a lot of it is inside baseball. You gotta,
inside baseball, yeah.
You gotta be another metaphor. If you're a Dungeons and Dragons person, you got to be on the quest, or you don't know what the hell's going on.
Right.
So I understand. I totally.
But also your remembrances of past media. I'm just playing devil's advocate for a second. Your remembrance of past media. Do you think it's more nostalgia, or is it more you're really seeing the degradation of it?
I kind of think it's more the degradation. I mean, I will admit to that kind of wistful. Oh, there was a time when I was young and everything was great, and we were more innocent. We didn't know what was going on behind the curtain back then. So maybe it was more idyllic because of that. But I do think, no, I mean, I'm worried. I mean, my God, I remember 30 years ago when the Telecommunications Act kicked in, and all of a sudden you saw this media consolidation and the big corporations. I always say, when I got out of college and wanted to get into radio, there were like 20 places to work in town, just in Chicago and the suburbs. And now there's 5, 4. I mean, that's it. And it's sad. I mean, it really is sad. And I also think because of that, homogenization and consolidation, less ideas are really making it to the free market. And that's again, or creativity. And that bums me up because really I got into radio to screw around. I mean, do comedy bits and have fun. And now it's, do the news and or well, give your political opinion. And I mean, it's, I just think it's less fun. And that's one of the reasons why it was so exciting when the digital platform really opened up. And I remember watching videos where like the video was the size of a postage stamp. I remember Icebox was a platform that would have interviews and interesting flash animation and things like that. And it's like, oh man, all right, stuff's happening there. So it was great to, kind of explore that and go, wait a minute, I can do that. I mean, it was so exciting in 2005. I read that Wired Magazine had a great article about podcasting. February of 2005. All of us, original podcasters remember that article. And it's like, that's what got us excited. Adam Curry is like the biggest name of somebody that was doing podcasting a year before I was. And I don't claim to be on the same level of him by any means, but he came from MTV. And so he was kind of known and was close enough in a Gen X way to my generation and thinking and everything. So I kind of followed him. And then that Wired magazine article came out and it's like, man, there's a possibility to get my word out there. 3 months later, I started WordBalloon.
Okay, but then do you think that gives people more of an opportunity? Because you're saying, okay, regular media doesn't allow more creativity, but then digital does. The only question is, how do people make money? Because it seems like you have to be very big in other kinds of media. So for instance, the people who've been big in TV start a podcast and they're going to get listeners because they've gotten their listeners or viewers on TV.
Well, yes. And I think that gives them an initial head start because they're bringing their audience with them. But, I was never a major radio or television person here in Chicago. At best, I was a sidekick to people like Mike North and Dan McNeil and Terry Boers on The Score. And then I was just a role player at XRT, really making commercials, the great rock station that I worked at for 10 years. So I do think, but I would rather point to podcast and YouTube stars that have made themselves personalities and are earning a living, and they didn't come with a media audience right away. What I think sells is you got to first of all, you have to be patient and you have to build your audience. But I think what most viewers and listeners appreciate is authenticity. You don't have to be Walter Cronkite and this is the news. You could have a squeaky, ridiculous voice, and I don't mean that in a mean way, or you could, have whatever. You could be a big guy like me and manage to do video and people are actually still watching. I mean, that's a great thing. The beautiful people and the beautiful sounding people, that was their arena for decades in broadcasting. And I think the digital platform has gotten away from that, and people want authenticity and they want genuine people. So if you're sincere, that'll be fine. You really can't get into podcasting or being a YouTuber with the idea of, well, I'm going to make money. It takes a while. You got to build your audience. You really shouldn't even ask an advertiser, I think, until you have at least 1,000 dedicated listeners and viewers. I know YouTube, I forget that might be the threshold for getting ads on YouTube still is 1,000 subscribers. I didn't start asking for sponsor money until then. The great thing is you don't need hundreds of thousands. If you've got a dedicated group of 5,000 people and you say, hey, this book is great, you should read it. And then the people who wrote the book actually see the meter move and people are buying it. That's great. That's a real influence. And it's a tangible effect on a product that you can then take to an advertiser and say, hey, people listen to what this guy says or this woman says. You should maybe consider advertising. I still believe in the advertising model. I mean, I know a lot of people don't, and I especially, and forgive the generalization again, that younger people expect everything to be free. Somebody should pay for it. It doesn't, and it's great when it is the person that's listening or watching. But no, I think this is still a great way to sell a product.
I don't know if I agree with the authenticity thing, because I think there are a lot of people who have personas online, and you also see that, of course, in Instagram and so forth. So, for instance, how many women are online who are not wearing jackets and so forth? They're wearing low cut stuff or whatever. And also, there's some
Oh,
other people too who have the online persona, and they're doing very well on TikTok. And if you meet them if you meet them in real life, they may barely have a personality, and they're making a lot of money. So what about
very,
that?
very fair. But what I would say is, and it's great because I'm glad we're talking about this.
Okay.
I think there are YouTubers and podcasters, and then there are social influencers.
Yeah.
And those are your TikToks and Instagram people. And I say the same thing because people are like, hey, you should put highlights of WordBalloon on TikTok. And I'm like, nobody wants to see me in spandex holding an energy drink, like a lot of the Instagram and TikTok people do. No, you're right about that. And they do create a persona and an illusion. And hell, you can even put in, the porn site like OnlyFans and stuff like that. No, that's fair, but I think they're doing a different thing than what I do, what you do. And by the way, I'm free, First Amendment, do what you want. That's great. But I kind of see that as a different category.
Okay. Because there are also people doing language lessons, for instance. Okay. So there are some really popular people doing French, English, Spanish, etc. And the most popular ones are ones that have a certain kind of persona online.
Okay, you're more cognizant of that than I am as far as learning.
Well, they're
language.
helpful.
Yeah, no,
but aesthetically, they look a certain way that's very appealing.
Well, and that's fair, and you're right about that. But and I suppose for that subject, it does maybe help to be a pleasant-looking person and have a pleasant personality and stuff. Sure, but and do-it-yourself ideas are great online because again, you can really get into the minutia. Yeah. You don't have to cut for a commercial. I have lots of friends that are very successful doing DIY kind of content. So I think that's great. But so I that's fair. I think there is a bit of salesmanship, but God, I'm trying to think of somebody, and maybe the reason why I can't is because what I'm saying is not true, but I think a lot of my favorite nerd geek culture sites, they're not pretty people. They're sometimes they're bigger than I am, and I'm I live in the big and tall section of the men's department, but yeah, they're not Robert Redfords, they're not Brad Pitts,
So I guess it depends on your niche.
Well, but actually, it's crazy. There are really pretty people there. Scott Porter, who was the star of Friday Night Lights, he was the quarterback. Beautiful guy, massive nerd, and really has been cashing more on his nerd cred than being good-looking leading man actor and everything.
But remember, he started out as a good-looking leading actor, so it did help him in the other part.
Well, but I'm just saying that that the nerd sphere doesn't just have freakazoids like myself. I mean, they do have some pretty people. Felicia Day, who wonderful actress, and she created the Guild. I mean, that's the great thing. She came from nerd culture, made her own thing. I guess she was kind of a background actress for a while, but really, I mean, she was even on Buffy. And I would really have to look back and see if her being on Buffy was first, or her creating this YouTube show called The Guild, which is about role-playing game people and stuff. But that was really what got her the juice. I could even use myself as an example. I spent 15 years in Chicago broadcasting, did fine, but was always a foot soldier, a role player. But then I started WordBalloon, and all of a sudden the Space Channel, the Discovery Channel sub channel, is like, hey, we're doing Prophets of Science Fiction, a television show. We want you to be one of the talking heads. Okay. And some of the other video opportunities I've gotten, I was on a show called The Unexplained, and did a whole thing about the Chicago connection to the JFK assassination. And it's all been through WordBalloon. It hasn't been through the big corporations of broadcasting that I worked at here in Chicago, including many years on and off with CBS. So, it's interesting.
Well, see, for me, because I started Radio Girl back in 2008, I started messing around, and then 2009, I created a company, etc.
Yeah.
And I think it's helped me professionally because in some situations, my reputation preceded me. And also my passion is media. I love it. Like I could do this forever. I wish that, if NPR called me and said, "Hey, we want you to be the media person," I'd be like, "Yes, sign me up," or even the New York Times or whoever, because I love it,
Yeah.
But so I found that I always say to people, if you want to do something, do it because it could help you in other areas. Because if you
Go ahead, finish your
no,
thought.
it's avoiding being a wannabe.
Yes. Well, the
Like-
other thing too is don't wait for the opportunity to find you. Make your own stuff. This is something I tell college students all the time. And it's like, look, I know you're prepping and you want that first job, but you are right now in an environment where you have so much equipment beyond your laptop that you can take advantage of. Make whatever you want. Spend that time. And even after college and stuff, while you're looking for that job, while you've got to wait tables or whatever retail job or you name it, entry level job that all of us in our 20s faced. Don't wait for that opportunity. Beyond building your resume and portfolio to get a job, take advantage of this digital platform and make your own stuff. You could be doing the talk. I'm a living example. There's no way in hell that WordBalloon would have made it on a local station. It might have in a barter situation where I'd pay for the airtime myself. But I mean, and there have been fledgling little geek culture shows over the years, local things. But I mean, again, I was only 4 years ahead of you in 05. And all of a sudden I was getting emails from like Australia and other places. And it's like, hey, we love what you do. And it's like, you're on the other side of the world. You're listening to my stuff. That's great. And it was amazing. And like I said, God, I even had this really crazy moment career-wise where I got let go from Sporting News Radio. And it took like 2 years to get my next radio job. And in the meantime, I was just building WordBalloon. And I remember like having these bad retail jobs, but doing these amazing interviews. And I'm like, I right now, I don't know where my broadcast career is going, but I'm having the time of my life doing these interviews online. And maybe this, I never really thought it would be something. I mean, that's the thing. It kind of, and moderate success, honestly, I'll put it because I'm not Adam Carolla. I'm not Kevin Smith. Name your favorite comedian or personality that is making a lot of money from their podcast or their video cast. But I'm making an interesting income, and it continues to improve. It was a surprise, but it was not. I didn't expect that to happen.
Okay, but see, that was back then when not as many podcasts were out there. Okay, so let's fast forward, because what happens is some people do want to do their own thing, and they look at the successful influencer or whatever lifestyle person, and they think, oh, wow, they make all this money. I want to do that. And I mean, I think those kinds of success stories are rare, don't you think?
I absolutely agree. I think, God, even honestly, by 2010, I think the swimming pool was pretty full. And yeah, I hear you. God, in fact, I remember a good friend of mine who also had a geek culture show. And he said, do you realize there's more geek talk than movie criticism as far as podcasts and stuff go? And this is like 2010. I'm like, yeah, you're not wrong. Well, again, I'm sorry. You have to have a distinct voice. You have to build an audience. It is possible, but it takes time. It took time back then, even when there were fewer people doing it. But yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a challenge now. And that's why I warn people, go for it. And again, make it, because it may also lead to a traditional media job. You never know. And that way you've got this back catalog beyond a highlight of maybe 2 minutes of an interview of, something you've done where, hey, no, hey, this is me talking to George Lucas for an hour, something like that. That's impressive.
Okay, but the problem with the regular media jobs is, so for instance, like I think it's really cool to do reporting in a smaller market because it's not all shootings like Chicago is. It's not all darkness and so forth. But what happens in a smaller market, if somebody wants to start out, is they're barely making any money. They could barely live on it.
Completely agree.
So now not many people are, you're saying not many people are watching the media, but now not many people want to work in it because they can make more money at Target.
Well, yeah, you're not wrong. And also think of a lot of these small, I mean, I started in Bloomington, Illinois.
Yeah.
My first 6 years in broadcasting were downstate in central Illinois. And think of the amount of stations that voice track in smaller markets, and or take syndicated radio and just have national shows on and stuff. No, I agree with you. I do think, and this is where I really wish they've really taken the bite out of the FCC. And it started with Ronald Reagan back in the 80s, but really it's been a bipartisan problem where I think the major corporations, the lobbyists for them, have really gotten to Washington, and it's like, no, we need less, deregulate. And instead, when the licenses were first happening, you had this legitimate community obligation of being a resource for the community to reflect what's going on. The license renewal, you had to prove that your station was actually contributing to the community and listening and providing people with low voices to reach other people. And no, that's gone away, and it's dumb. And I think it's hurt the product. And also, yeah, as you say, I think not needing as many local people working boots on the ground and stuff. Yeah, it's bad. And also, yeah, you're right. I mean, it's the crux of the Writers Guild and the Actors Guild strikes that are happening on a national level, of what they do and what they create. It should be more valuable, and these jobs should not be side income jobs. You shouldn't have to be a bartender, but also write for television. Right. And I mean, there are the 1%ers. There's the Chandra Rhimeses and Taylor, and I forget his name, the Yellowstone guy, that are absolutely, making millions and stuff with their ideas. But there always was this important working class of actors and writers that that made good entertainment and made the studios money. They deserve to be fairly compensated.
But it reminds me of what Lucille Ball was saying. Remember, she was talking about how the business changed. Lucille Ball.
Yeah, what did she say?
No, remember, she was talking about how there used to be a studio system, and it was easier to learn skills. Sure,
in the movies, absolutely. And yeah, you're right. Beyond giving actors the chance to just be on camera, they taught them. And yeah, in fact, it was with Lucille Ball, it was Ginger Rogers' mother, who was a big stage mother, and to get her off the backs of various film directors, the studio got started and said, hey, we're going to give you this part of the studio. You work with the young actors and actresses. Every Friday they would have these like little skits that they would just perform on the studio lot for directors and producers to see these new faces. And it really was this great thing. I mean, the studio system had its flaws as well.
Because that's the thing, is that's what she was talking about too, because okay, the studio system controlled people's lives, but then they got training and so forth, but they had to tell you what you had to do. Yes. Then it became emancipated. People became emancipated, but then it's gone the other way. It's like the Wild West, no pun intended. You know what I mean?
100%.
So,
but also, you didn't, and it's still happening now. You can make a movie or mostly movies now, where there are independent production companies, and in the face of Warner Brothers and Paramount, you even got small boutique studios like Blumhouse and A24, especially Blumhouse, where they're working in the horror genre, and they're making $10 million movies that make $200 million at the box office. Yeah, that's a hit. And right. Whereas the massive studios see the success of the Marvel movies and the Star Wars movies, and it's like, well, we could make $1 billion. And it's like, wake up, are you nuts? I'm like, that's an exception. It is not the rule. And I'd tear my very long hair out and get angry when, Superman Man of Steel, it only made $600 million. Only? Well, we really wanted it to make $1 billion. Well, you're an idiot. I'm sorry. Right. It's like, it's just unrealistic expectations. Forgive the metaphor, but the chickens are coming home to roost now. And that's why the studios are like, wait a minute, we got in the streaming business. We thought this was going to be a cash cow. No, it's not. In fact, actually, it's cutting into our theater going business. Man, oops. Now what? And or again, COVID, my God, those 3 years really screwed up a lot of, from from the corner bar and restaurant to massive corporations that counted on a public going in and enjoying their product. And that went away for 3 years. I mean, we're really lucky in a lot of ways because it basically was almost a depression-like environment. And I forgive the moment of political talk, but thank God we had a government that went, hey, you know something? We got you covered. We're going to help you out during this weird time. Don't worry.
Are you talking about our state government? Because our state government was very much like that.
And I would say the national government as well. I mean, I really think there was this genuine effort of we can't have another depression. We got to get through this.
But then there was also a lot of fraud during that time.
100%. Well, yeah, but Margaret, that's always been the case. I can't cite specific depression examples, but as you likely know, Harry Truman, before he became vice president, was during the war when everybody was getting war contracts and people were taking advantage of that. The Senate had teeth back then, and they went after companies that were abusing a war contract or whatever. So yeah. And I mean, and honestly, I have no idea what's happening right now. And I think it would be a mistake, but I think both the previous administration and the current administration let a lot of that corporate BS slide. And I think that's pretty lousy. I really think that's lousy.
Yeah, well, let's not get into policy and so forth.
Yeah. Well, and again, I think that was a bipartisan problem.
Right.
Go ahead.
But I mean, but back to the strike. See, I'm in the WGA now. I've never had anything produced. Like I've written a script, I registered my idea, the WGA website.
Yeah.
But after going to all these meetings for so many years, like a couple of years during the pandemic, these are meetings with other WGA writers. I learned that it is extremely hard to get something produced. It's actually there's some experienced people who I took this class, and there's some experienced people who spoke, and they said it's now harder than ever to get something produced because the way the system's so different. And then there are all these independent companies, and you have to hope that it makes it to some place that will actually get made. And they said there are ideas that are made like in a pilot kind of situation, and then they drop it.
Well, that's when you have to be creative and beyond fighting like-minded people that might be in a writer's group. Again, DIY, do it yourself. I really think I point to what I did with WordBalloon. It's not a dramatic production. It's purely just, an interview talk show. But I've had ideas, and it's like, all right, well, I do know, and I haven't pulled the trigger on them, but I've got my own fiction ideas. And honestly, especially coming from radio, my thought is make an audio. You can do it on a shoestring budget. You can do it on a shoestring group of people, and then just have maybe you could do it yourself, for God's sake. I mean, there was a great old radio show from the 40s called Calling All Detectives, and it was a local Chicago show, and it was only 15 minutes long. And it was one guy. He was the host, but he did all the voices you heard as well. And you know my background that I used to do, and still I'm a mimic, and I can do different voices and things. I did it at the Score. I did it at a lot of places I've worked at radio wise. And my feeling is I can do this on my own. If I really wanted to pursue some of my ideas, I could make an audio. And again, it's just like doing WordBalloon or Radio Girl, where put it out there and you might grow. A lot of my cartoonist friends started their both comic strips and long form cartooning and making graphic novels and stuff. They put them online. They gathered enough of an audience that eventually the major publishers are like, hey, we want to work with you. So while I think it is a longer path to success, I don't think the doors are completely closed. And again, it does give more work for the independent writer and the independent people to make that stuff. But the democratization of technology has been, I think, so great. When I got out of college in 1980, I'm going to think 88, my thought was initially, well, if I save up $5,000, I can build a home studio. I don't need a home studio anymore. I got my laptop, right, and it's software, and just microphones like your microphone that you're holding right now. So
this is one of the original podcasting microphones. Of course, now they make much better ones, but I keep this for memory.
No, Margaret, honestly, people ask me about starting a podcast, and what equipment do they need? And I'm like, I'm still playing from the 2010 playbook. I'm like, go online. They got much more modern and more efficient equipment and software options. I mean, I still occasionally use Audacity, the free
Yeah, that's a good
audio
one.
software.
It's gotten way better over the years.
Yeah, or I don't have Adobe Audition. I have the predecessor of Adobe Audition, Cool Edit,
which is like 10 years ago or whatever.
Oh my God, it's 15 years ago.
Yeah.
And again, it's like, no, this was
Audacity is great though. I think Cool Edit's not stable, but Audacity is incredible.
Oh, that's interesting. I mean, I think I understand what you're saying. I guess my version of it is I don't even have the final edition. I use 2.0, Cool Edit 2.0.
Okay.
But no, they're solid. They're solid. They're reliable.
Okay, but let's go back to the democratization, because I often say that like, for instance, I love writing. And so I started blogging in, my gosh, maybe 2004, 2005. And it's just so great to put your voice out there. And of course, then again, I got writing work from it because I was just doing my, writing my passion. And then people hired me to be a ghostwriter. They hired me to write blog posts, to write articles, etc. And because they can do just a search and see what my style is like. And I have a voice. But then I think about when we think about how the media has changed, the broadcast media, it's really because of digital. And I think the toothpaste is out of the tube.
You think what is that?
The toothpaste. I mean, I think
it's out of the tube. Okay, I'm with you now. Well, I didn't understand.
I mean, the broadcast media has changed. And one of the reasons is also because the people running it are not very savvy. And listen, I mean, I don't want to get into too many deals. You can get in the details because you know my opinions, but
I'll give my opinions as well.
Okay, give your opinion.
Well, the management of broadcasting comes now more from sales than it does from programming. And listen,
why do you think that? Why do you think that?
I don't know. I think because maybe they're more business minded, and ultimately these companies are more about making money than they are making good programming. And I understand that, but it used to be much more hand in hand. I mean, and listen, I won't even refer to sales as a necessary evil. This should be an equal partnership, and both sides should understand the value of the other. I unfortunately, again, quarterly profit is more important to these big broadcasting conglomerates than, hey, we have a great show and people are really starting to get into it. And that's why it is always interesting when something innovative happens on one of the major broadcast corporations. The Good Place, the Ted Danson show with Veronica Mars, I forget, Kristen Bell. Really interesting, groundbreaking idea for a sitcom, and also just not only unconventional, but eventually the producers are like, hey, we can only make like 10 or 11 of these a year because it's really hard to come up with these really interesting ideas. Now, in a normal situation, and that would be like, I gotta get at least 20 episodes. No, but I mean, luckily I think NBC realized the environment they were currently in, and again, this is only within the last 5 or 10 years as far as The Good Place goes, but they saw this that, hey, we've got something that would be a buzz show on cable or on a streamer, but we've got it. Let's not screw this up. But I really think that even that time has passed. I don't think the eyeballs are there anymore. But also getting back to why it is these ways, I do think the quarterly profits are really more, and that's why the studios are being lousy to the writers and the actors right now, because like, don't mess with our profits. What are you talking about?
No, but when you were in radio before, didn't profit matter? I always ask these people who've been in radio for a while.
Sure it did. Absolutely it did. I mean,
so how were they able to be more creative and not be as sales oriented as you're saying?
Because I think they were like, when I got into broadcasting in the mid 80s, it was kind of the hangover period of the previous decades. So a lot of traditional radio was still acceptable. And I mean, they even had things like and they still exist depending on the radio station, little 2-minute features where 1 minute is content, 1 minute is a commercial. And you could have, I remember there was a guy, Clarence, who did the All My Children soap opera update. And it was this very street level guy just being really funny, going over the plot points of the day of each episode of All My Children. And we listened to it, and it was hilarious. And it was just this guy imitating the women fighting with each other, imitating the guys, and just this very basic blue collar kind of level understanding of what's going on. And it was entertaining as hell. I even know when I worked at WXRT, the rock station, we would get all these different little features. We wouldn't play the features, but we'd play the commercials because we could make, they would pay us money for running their commercials or whatever. So yeah, it's unfortunately that's what's happened. Is, again, I just think death by a thousand cuts. I just think little by little it's been more important about profit than content.
But then we go back to, I think, one of the best shows on local TV, maybe the best show, the morning show on WGN TV.
Great show.
They have that vibe. They have
Yeah.
fun. It's informative. And I only started watching it regularly because my husband watches it.
Funny.
And I don't think, is there anything like it in America? I don't know.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, again, we're stuck here. I don't know. I would hope so. But I do think you're right. I think they saw what was happening on all the networks' morning shows, and are like, hey, we could do something different. And they got the right people.
Yeah.
And not only the right people in front of the camera, but behind the scenes as well, that would they would create funny bits. Again, I think WGN is a very positive exception that does cater to the community and
what's
find ways of
interesting is,
presenting the community.
and what's interesting is they went through an ownership change and it didn't change. The
No,
content of the show didn't
and that's
change.
been a relief, honestly, because I think
Yeah.
some people were concerned that Nexstar, that now owns WGN locally and also the national product as well. Thankfully, they've had people that understand and want to maintain things. Let's go to a previous owner when Sam Zell bought the Tribune. Sam Zell is for people who don't know, big real estate guy here in Chicago, bought the Tribune, really wanted to put his imprint on TV and radio. And we have, as Margaret and I know, in Chicago, we have there's works for WGN, this amazing weatherman, Tom Skilling, who is the Walter Cronkite of weather. He is the most trusted man in local weather. And
he's got a real passion for it too.
Absolutely. Well, a guy that maybe isn't the best looking. He's certainly not the Robert Redford of weather, but he's, again, I go back to genuine and authentic. I mean, and he's like, he gets he's a real meteorologist. He understands it. He comes across as this very friendly guy, but really wants you to know the right information. And I remember a friend who was in a WGN TV production meeting with, if not Sam Zell, his main lieutenant that was overseeing it. And it's like, why do we spend 10 minutes on weather? And don't tell me it's because Tom Skilling is the Walter Cronkite of weather. And this guy stood up and said, well, then you don't want to hear the truth. He said,
Ooh.
You got to understand that people are watching the competing newscasts at 9 or 10 o'clock. And they keep flipping back to WGN because I want to see what Tom Skilling has to say. And they're like, you want to get rid of that? You want to cut his time? Do you think that's smart? And finally, they're like, all right. And they backed off. But again, that's the thing, man. They don't, we're very lucky. I think Chicago is a very provincial market. We like our people. We like our local people. If you're going to come in as an outsider and try to break in the market, you can't come in like a cowboy and go, all right, you local yokels, this is what you've been wrong about all the time, because you'll lose. And I'm sure the amount of radio personalities. I remember a guy from Cleveland named Rover that came to Chicago and within a year was gone because nobody gave a damn. Because
in Cleveland, he was huge.
Yes, he was. I even got to know a couple of his producers and they're like, no, he's a really good guy. But yeah, man, it's like, again, he was a bad boy in Cleveland. So he kind of came in like Black Bart, guns a-blazing. Here's what you guys are getting wrong. And it's like, no.
Oh, really? He had that attitude?
Well, a little bit. And again, it's like, I mean, hey, some guys, well, I don't think Mancow Muller, another Chicago morning personality who had a very long, successful run here, but came as an outsider.
But he did it right. I mean, he also hung out with people here in his off hours. He got to know people. So
yeah. I mean, and that's the problem with national syndication sometimes, or even like not even full national, but regional syndication. And there's a lot of good shows that just wouldn't make it here in Chicago because they didn't cater to that audience. Rush Limbaugh, really built his audience in Chicago first before he went national. And I think that's something that gets forgotten when they write the Rush Limbaugh biography and stuff. But he was he was really doing his stuff just locally on WLS, the ABC affiliate here in Chicago, before he went national, and the show was still on LS.
But wasn't he based in Sacramento or
Originally? Yes,
okay.
but I don't. Yeah, and that's a fair point. I don't know if I don't know if he was here, but I do know that
he was not here.
Okay, but then, and again, maybe I'm misremembering, but it seemed to me that he was doing his show in Chicago. He might have still been doing it in other cities,
Okay.
but it seemed like that was.
I didn't know that because I thought because I used to listen to him a lot, and he used to say that he always was thanking the people in Sacramento because that's what helped him launch nationally. But wasn't he? I thought he was based in New York. Then he moved to Florida. But he did make it big in Chicago. But I think the bottom line is if you talk to an audience that's not been spoken to, then you'll get people.
Absolutely,
which is what he did.
Yeah, 100%. You're right, Margaret. I mean, that's true. That I do think he was the first conservative voice to really cut through. Again, I think some people just have a subconscious bias of what they believe, and that might have influenced how they presented ideas. That's that. I mean, honestly, I do think that's a legitimate, if not complaint, fact in terms of, I mean, really conservative ideas were really kind of fringe broadcasting until a guy like Rush. But now, of course, the scale is tipped completely opposite, and it's very difficult to find consistent liberal ideas. I mean, we have WCPT in Chicago. It's only a daytime station. They were part of Air America. Air America really only lasted, I mean, it was only viable for about 2 or 3 years and only lasted for 5 because it was hard to find sponsors and stuff. It's very, the national radio ecosphere is very interesting.
No, but I think what helped Rush Limbaugh too is that he was from Missouri. So he knew middle America and he knew how to speak to people.
Sure.
And some of these other people are from the coast and he said this, and a lot of people, I always joke with people when I meet them from New York or LA, I always say, yeah, I'm from Chicago. I live in flyover country. And they're like,
right.
Whoa. Like, no, but that's how it was seen.
100%.
We're a way more major city than Boston, for instance.
Well, and also they forget that until the country really got connected with cable and some other things. I mean, we had they tied the coast together with the coaxial cable even in the late 50s as far as TV goes. But when broadcasting really debuted, every major city was its own kingdom. And really, like our broadcast history here in Chicago was just as vital as New York. If anything, LA had to catch up. They didn't need to catch up because they had the movie business.
Yeah.
But certainly in the radio years and stuff, no, the major hubs of broadcasting were New York, Chicago, Philadelphia was also part of that as well. You're right, Boston, because I think of its proximity to New York.
Right.
It wasn't necessary per se. But again, I'm sure they had their local media, but no, even Hubbard Broadcasting, which was based in the Twin Cities, Minnesota, St. Paul and Minneapolis. They had a very healthy local broadcasting history, very, very much like WGN, and entertainers that would travel the country. And while they were in the flyover states and they'd be in Minnesota, you're damn right they stopped in Minneapolis, St. Paul. And they had this wonderful video library of interviews that went back to the 60s and stuff of major stars that, made sure they did the local talk show and stuff. And that's the thing, like we had Irv Kupson in and his local radio and television shows. And they were very important to the city. But yeah, each city was its own ecosystem of broadcasting.
Well, I was gonna say, when you said that Rush Limbaugh made it in Chicago, I always think about that old saying that says, if you make it in Peoria, you'll make it anywhere.
Yeah.
Because Peoria used to be the testing ground for stage shows.
Middle America. Yeah, you're right.
Right.
Well,
but when people say middle America, they speak about it dismissively. And I think what's happened in our country is there's been a kind of revolt against that idea. Okay, we've seen it in various ways. I think Rush Limbaugh was part of that because
absolutely,
he was definitely clearly speaking to people. And he was letting them know too, like, okay, I'm paying attention to you. They think you don't matter, but you do. And people are like, yeah, I do matter.
100%. No, you're right. And I think there ultimately became a backlash towards the East and West Coasts that, yeah, we matter too. And you're right. And, God, I mean, again, forgive the politics. People like Richard Nixon, I think, tapped into that. Ronald Reagan tapped into that. In Nixon's case, the silent majority. Ronald Reagan appealing to the working class that for decades before him were Democrats. And all of a sudden he comes along and says, hey, I understand you. And and again, from Dixon, Illinois. I mean, there's a guy that, was from small town America and stuff. No, you're absolutely right. And that's why I worry about today's environment, because like I said, with voice tracking and
Well, now there's AI too. There's that station out in Oregon, which is totally AI.
Yep. That really scares me, because I could see in a music presentation station, doesn't matter what the format is. I mean, already with voice tracking, you don't need a DJ. You just need someone to, say it's 97.9, the hits, and then you go into music and stuff. I've never listened to that Oregon station. Have you?
No, but I was going to say also another thing about voice tracking. It's not just voice tracking, but also there are local stations here in Chicago, music stations, and they don't even have live people. They have people voice tracking their own market.
Oh, absolutely. No, I one of the adult contemporary stations that I worked at for several years, they still had DJs, but the big announcer voice was this lovely woman that was from LA and actually is a big animation voiceover actress, as well as doing a lot of commercials and voice tracking and stuff. No, it's a shame, because the opportunities I had while I was in college, I was working in Central Illinois and working, I'd work the overnight shift, or I'd work the shift till midnight. That's how I cut my teeth. That's how I made my first, 10,000 mistakes, as Malcolm Gladwell says, before you get good at something.
But at the same time, though, there's also podcasting, which is not live. That's why I like to go to Twitch. Twitch is live, but I mean, that's more music mixing. But so what do you think about that?
Twitch is good Lord, Twitch is everything. Twitch is a guy playing a video game and you're watching him play the video game.
Yeah, I'm not interested.
Twitch is one of those social influencers in a bikini standing in one of those blow up swimming pools.
The bathtub
I will
thing.
confess. Go ahead.
No, there's some category on Twitch. It's like tubs and something. I'm like, not interested.
Exactly. But it's like, I was curious, and I'm just like, really? That's it?
Oh, wait, so she's just so they're just standing at a tub or whatever?
Well, yeah, again, the example, it's a woman, it's a pretty young woman in a bikini. And I don't know, she's answering questions as people throw her money. And it's just like, oh, that's really nice. Well, I agree. Oh, no, that's interesting. Oh, thank you. I like Aerosmith too. And it's like, all right, whatever. I mean, again,
that's what
it's just like, here's money. Thank you.
That's funny. Yeah. But what do you think about the fact that, okay, let's not Twitch. What do you think about the fact that podcasts aren't live, and podcasts have become very popular?
Podcasts aren't live, you said?
Yeah. Podcasts are not live streaming.
Well, it's funny. My podcast platform, Spreaker, does leave that live podcast option. They have to go through the Spreaker platform to experience it. And again, that's why, I do my interviews live, as we're doing now. I do my interviews live on YouTube and then turn them into podcasts the next day. And I don't mind doing that. I like this. Again, coming from radio, I like the spontaneity.
Me too. But I'm just wondering, what I'm saying is that before they had a lot of live streaming, podcasts were recorded. So what do you think about that when we're saying, oh, it's not live, but then we're like, wait, people started listening to podcasts?
I think it was just an evolution as far as the ability to do live. Again, it's not necessary to be entertained by something. It's okay to be pre-recorded. And what I think the advantage that audio and video podcasting has to television, again, is we don't have to break every 6 minutes for a commercial. We can have a long form conversation. We're doing it right now. We've been speaking for an hour. And no, I love that. And especially coming from radio, I can't tell you how many times when I was at the Score and we're having this amazing interview and all of a sudden the program would be like, okay, you got to move on to something new. And it's like, we're having a great talk, man. Come on, what are you doing? But, or, hey, got a break for traffic, got a break for the top of the hour news, whatever it is. And I understand that. So it is wonderful to have this, again, ability on this platform to talk without being interrupted.
Yeah, but then sometimes people don't want to listen that long, but whatever. I mean,
I don't worry about that. You're right.
You know?
I mean, really, MTV and video and everything else has shortened the attention span of people. I respect that. That's fine. But then don't listen to me because I like long form.
yeah, me too. I like long form. Okay, so let's go back to this idea because I like long form too. And I'll be on Twitch. Like I watch DJs on Twitch. Okay. And I
Okay.
listen. I'll be on there for like 2 hours listening because they're
Sure.
live. And also
Sure.
people are making comments and then they're responding to the comments. Sometimes they're responding with a microphone. It's cool. But there are a lot of people and a lot of experts say keep your stuff short. So that's why TikTok is popular because they got like, 10-second videos or whatever.
Yeah, I get that. I totally understand that, but it's not everybody. And I would point to an expert like Kevin Smith, who pointed out narrowcasting versus broadcasting. And like they said, again, Kevin Smith, the Silent Bob from the Jay and Silent Bob movies, and he made Clerks and all those movies, and still makes movies today. He's a big voice in the nerd culture, and he's a great example of, while he has his following as far as the films that he's made and stuff, he's not a major star, but he's kind of a cult following. But all you need is a cult following to succeed. And I'll admit my numbers. I get between 50,000 to 60,000 downloads a month for WordBalloon. And it's nice, but it's certainly not the millions a week that, and I can only think of comedians, Adam Carolla, Mark Maron, Kevin Smith himself.
Well, Mark Maron also put his flag, he stuck his flag in the earth early. I mean, he's one of the early podcasters.
Well, that's funny, Margaret, because I've heard him claim that as well. He started in 2010. And I suppose given that
in the comedy world though, I don't think a lot of people before.
But he wasn't an A-list comic. He was a working comedian, but wasn't always first on the bill. He would be a middle or even a third comedian on the bill before he really planted his flag in the podcast world. And now he is an A-lister. And
but he did also long form interviews. I mean, I remember when he started and my brother was listening. He's like, oh my gosh, this guy's really incredible. I'm like, wow, he is. He's really good because he would talk to people in depth. And a lot of people weren't doing that. Then, of course, a lot of comedians came after him, but their stuff was more, it wasn't really in depth. It was more just like
screwing around,
quick and cute and short in segments,
Yeah. And screwing around and stuff. No, I agree with you. Well, and Maron was on Air America doing good interviews and stuff before starting his podcast. And in fact, I know like his first few months, he was sneaking into Air America after he was fired and using their studios after hours to do his first few shows. And I love that about there is that kind of outlaw, an outlier, I think, persona or feeling about doing this stuff that we do on the digital platform versus traditional broadcasting that appeals to me. I mean, we're not radicals in any way, but like I said, it's just nice to be able to do long form without having to worry about breaking every 6 minutes or 15 minutes. So that's
now what the trend is on YouTube, which I should start doing, is instead of just doing this like big blob of a video, what the people do is they segment it. So what they'll do, I don't know if you know how to do this, but you put your time code.
Yes.
And then it'll break it up. What do you think about that?
I'm lazy. I don't do that. I should do that.
It takes some work, because you got to figure out what the topic. But also, if you're freewheeling conversation, it's harder to break it up like that in segments.
Agreed. Yeah, I think depending on what your subject is and how you conduct your show. But back to what you were saying too, that people chop their content up into smaller bits. It's micro content, and let's put a minute or 3 minutes on TikTok. Or a 5-minute piece on Facebook video. And I think that's valuable. And
it's even shorter. It's like 30 seconds, 10 seconds.
Sure it is. Yeah. And even YouTube has those shorts that are, like you said, just 30 seconds and stuff. I think that caters to a younger audience. And I understand that and I respect that. But at the end of the day, I want to do what appeals to me. I'll have guests on that don't necessarily fall in the nerd sphere. My good friend Cameron McWhorter, he's a reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He was there in Atlanta. He's based in Atlanta, and again, sorry for the politics, but he was there for Fani Willis's indictment reading 2 nights ago, and was covering that. And but also he's written great history books as well about various things. And he's just really smart. And I really want him to come on WordBalloon and just talk about it, because I'm interested in that. My friend Jesse Rogers is the voice of ESPN Chicago baseball, and also is a national baseball expert now and stuff. I had him on WordBalloon because we're friends, and it's like, okay, you're doing something interesting in broadcasting, and we're friends, so I can ask you. And luckily, I think the core of my audience trusts my taste.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, if it's interesting to you, John, we're gonna go on the ride with you. It's not the whole audience.
Okay, that was my next question. Yeah, because the thing is, you like to do long form, but then some people like to do certain things, but they don't have the audience. So do they keep doing what they like, or?
Yeah, I would say trust your instincts. And also, frankly, the likelihood is the younger people than me doing short form, they're connecting with their audience. And that's probably good. That's great. I also believe, especially, and I'm just shy of 60. I'll be 59 in December. I think that on the digital platform, there isn't enough programming that caters to my demographic. And I want them to know, because I remember Mrs. Brady, Florence Henderson from the Brady Bunch. She had a talk show that was on like a cable channel that did cater to a senior audience, and she would have these old celebrity guests on and stuff. And she was really a good interviewer. And it's like, well, where do we go? I mean, if we don't want to watch, the kids in spandex on TikTok or Instagram, what's there for us on the digital platform? And it's like, well, hey, I'm here. Don't worry. I mean, a bunch of old nerds, and there are plenty of old nerds that are my age and older. And it's like, no, don't worry, man. We got you covered. I'm going to talk to that Batman writer from the 70s that might be in his 70s himself, but wrote great stories. And hey, what was it like? And what do you think now? And what are your thoughts now? Are you still, my friend Jerry Conway is a guy that's, in his late 70s, is the guy that killed Gwen Stacy, Spider-Man's girlfriend, back in the 70s. But also throughout his writing career, went on to television, wrote for Murder, She Wrote and Diagnosis Murder, and all these other adventures in writing. So when I talked to Jerry, and also, by the way, still does comic books, which is great. I'm so glad that he still connects with a modern audience. But that's why it's like, oh my God, let's talk about your career. And I don't know if the 20-something nerd would think of, oh, let me talk to Jerry Conway.
Well, it's true, because that's a good thing. I write this stuff on LinkedIn because sometimes people are whining, or they're saying certain things. And I'll say, well, why don't you just try tapping older people? Because all the stuff that you're whining about, I'm not saying all older people are better workers and more insightful. But I mean, I have 30 years, for instance, in education. I have 30 years experience in education. Okay, so I have some insight here. So if you're starting out teaching or something, believe me, talk to me, as opposed, and also, but even in radio, I have like over 16 years.
There's, I always say, as we get older, it's not wisdom, it's perspective, because we have been around so long.
Yeah.
And I agree. I think both companies and talent want that young audience. That's who they want.
That's understandable.
And it is understandable, but they also forget that the senior audience has a lot of disposable income, because the kids are out of the house, and some might be on a fixed retirement sort of budget where they don't have a lot of money to spend, but a lot do.
Oh yeah.
And also, again, they want to be entertained. And it's the grandma factor as far as getting the digital content. And prior to YouTube, I think there really was a barrier of, well, you really needed to have a bit of smarts to, well, go to this URL and download this MP3 to listen to the podcast. And that can get very complicated for somebody that is older than even, me or you or whatever.
Yeah.
But I think that, again, I think things like YouTube and other things have made it simpler. YouTube could easily one day decide, we're not going to take any independent content anymore. And all of a sudden, all of our content will disappear. That worries me. And as you were asking me the other day, I do keep digital backups of everything I do.
Do you host your own audio or video on your own website? Do you have it in your files? Like all my podcasts are in my files.
I have them in my files and I keep them, But again, I syndicate through Spreaker currently.
But
which
your
is the-
URL, does it originate at your website or does it originate at Spreaker?
No, it originates through Spreaker and through YouTube, but I post them on my website. I
Okay.
post the you can see the video and you can see the audio at wordballoon.com. And that's great. But I also just, obviously as I'm uploading that stuff, I certainly keep the original files. And yeah, so
Do you upload to Spreaker or upload to your own website?
say it again.
Do you upload to Spreaker or upload to your
I
own
upload
website?
to Spreaker. And
Okay, because see, for me, this is what I tell my students in podcasting. I upload my audio to my website. So if Blogger and everything were to go down, I have everything. It's radiogirl.us blah 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 .mp3.
Oh, and that's interesting because then so do people don't download their content from that?
They can, they can. Yeah, they can download.
Well, they can, but do they?
Yeah. Yeah, I've downloads. I have more hits than downloads. I have more plays than downloads.
I know back in the day when I was getting started, to host your own bandwidth could be very costly.
Yeah.
So that's why, I mean, even
but no, mine wasn't costly. Because I have a I'm gonna give a shout out to Tiger Tech. Tiger Tech has offered unlimited bandwidth since I started, which I think I set up in 2008, 2009. I forgot when, but
that's smart. And I wish I had known that back then. Because again, I leaned on Libsyn. That was my original.
Oh, Libsyn's great.
It absolutely is. But where I was a little frustrated was I was getting and still do get significant numbers. And they're like, yeah, but not big enough to do advertising. And I'm like, no, I'm ready for advertising. And that's when originally Blog Talk Radio, which became Spreaker, came to me and said, hey, we see your numbers. We are getting advertising on an aggregate level.
Yeah.
Say we represent 1,000 shows and we present that to these big advertisers so we can get Old Navy commercials, McDonald's commercials, because they're going on 1,000 shows. And between all of you, it's a couple million audience as far as, aggregately speaking and stuff. And that's been thankfully the model that has evolved. But Libsyn just was dragging their heels about it.
Okay.
So, bye, see ya. And
no, I agree. That's good because it reminds me of early days of radio because my dad used to talk about the red network and the blue network. And I think they did a similar thing where they had all these shows that went national and then they would sell the advertising based on that.
Yeah, that was NBC. They had the red network and they had the blue network. The blue network ultimately split off from NBC and became ABC.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're right about that. Absolutely. And then there were even regional networks like on the West Coast. There was on the East Coast, there was the Mutual Network, but it wasn't completely national. And on the West Coast to middle, the West Middle was the Don Lee Network. And they would combine. So a lot of shows like The Shadow, the old mystery show, on the East Coast, it was Mutual. On the West Coast, it was the Don Lee Network.
Okay.
So,
what I was gonna say also about hosting your own audio. See, before I started teaching at Columbia, before I started teaching podcasting, I did some library seminars, workshops about podcasting, and I told the people early on. This is really before podcasting took off big time. I said, post the stuff on your own site and own all your audio because you don't want to rely on other stuff.
Absolutely. Well,
but then what you could do is you can post the stuff on your own site and then syndicate through something else and then get the advertising that way. But I don't make money for my podcasting. I use it for my passion and also it's led to work. So,
understood. Well, and that was my original intent as well, was to just generate interviews to get a better broadcast job. But then it became its own thing.
Right.
So then they were alongside each other, my broadcast career and my podcast career. And then, like I said, 3 years ago, it was like, all right, sorry, COVID, no personal bad feelings, but you got to go.
Right.
I'm like, all right, well, I spent 30 years in Chicago radio. I'm like, all right, that's a career. That's pretty good. But also I know I'm not done. And I truly, there are so many friends that I've known through broadcasting that I've encouraged to start a podcast. And some of them now are retired from broadcasting. And they're doing amazing podcasting. My good friend George Hoffman has a wonderful sports interview show called Tell Me a Story I've Never Heard. Yeah. And again, thankfully, with 40 plus years, almost 50 years in the business, George has this incredible, here's an old word, Rolodex of old context. And just being in the sports broadcasting business, he knows everybody.
Yeah.
And can go to Pat O'Brien and Bob Costas and all these old, grand old men of broadcasting now, but Marv Albert, but he knew them when they were schleppers, just cutting their teeth, when
Yeah.
Bob was just a St. Louis broadcaster, when Marv was just the local New York broadcaster. And, again, they just got to know each other as colleagues in different cities. They're titans. So my good friend, Robert Kirkman, who created The Walking Dead, I knew Robert when he was in Kentucky, and hey, man, I got this great idea about a zombie book.
Nice.
And it's like, yeah, good for you, Robert, whatever. And now he's the
That's
George
cool.
Lucas of zombies. It's like,
yeah.
oh my
That's
God, way to
true.
go, Robert. Robert's a mogul now. And I love that. And my good friend, Mike Greenberg at ESPN, wonderful broadcast career. My good friend, Judd Surratt, who was my co-producer for Dan McNeil and Terry Boers on The Score locally. He's the radio voice now of the Boston Bruins. I love all of my friends and the successes they've had and the interesting career paths. My friend Cameron McWhorter that I mentioned earlier, we've been friends since high school. He's always been one of my smartest friends, and his writing career has been so fascinating to watch. And he just has this treasure trunk of treasure chest of stories that are just there for us to mine and talk about and stuff.
So in other words, you're not a hater, because
Not
some
at
people
all.
are not. Some people say that they support certain people, but then when you really have something going, they drop out.
Luckily, my dad and my mom were great examples of, or Jesse Owens has the wonderful quote, run your own race. Don't worry about the guy in the next lane. Just focus on yourself. Do the best you can. No, I love the fact that I have so many successful friends in broadcasting. And listen, just like the movies, broadcasting is a crapshoot. You either get people that you work for that understand you and only want to help you get better. And then you got people with no malice. Sometimes there's malice, but really it's just, it's business. Hey, something that's great, but I know a guy in Cleveland that can do your job better. See you later. Okay,
Right.
whatever. And that's why, unfortunately, despite being in broadcasting for 30 years, I had more program directors that were not haters, but just indifferent to what I was doing. I did the job good enough, but ultimately, said that we're going to hire somebody younger that'll work cheaper. See you later.
Right.
Okay. I mean, that's,
Or it
that,
could be
and
that,
that's
or it could be
why,
that.
go ahead.
No, or it could be that they favor somebody else because they know this person, or they're
Oh, sure.
related to this
Nepotism
person,
and friendships and everything. Absolutely.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. But I would say that that's why it's important to create and own your own stuff. And that's why the digital platform has given us that advantage. I own WordBalloon. And I may jump to another podcast network at some other time. But if I do, I will still own WordBalloon and all the content. And it's much more of a business arrangement than working for a broadcast network or a broadcast station. And that's
although I do work for a broadcast station and I absolutely love it. I left radio at the end of 2022, literally the last day of the year. And I thought I had nothing going on. I was like, well, I don't know. I'll just do something else. And 2 months passed. I thought, oh my gosh, I've got to get back in it. I'm like going through withdrawal. And then I applied to WGN Radio. No regrets. It is the most incredible experience. And I get to go live. I'm on the air live during a newscast. So tomorrow, I'm going to be working tomorrow morning. He'll probably put me on the air live to talk about something.
great.
It's so exciting. And I've got sometimes I only have 20 seconds to do it, but that's really a thrill. And thank you, Nexstar, for giving us this opportunity. Because
No, I hear you. And honestly, and you'll forgive me if I'm presumptuous to say what I saw of your career, observing as we worked together for a few years. You were a behind the scenes person. Occasionally you did get a report here and there, but very rarely.
Well, I didn't, because it was a union shop and I didn't join out. And also it was just very segmented. And also just, I looked to see what they were doing. I thought, do I want to spend $2,000 to join the union in order to get on the air occasionally? And also I didn't, to be on the air at WBN, it used to be that you needed more experience and I had none. Now it doesn't matter. Okay.
Well,
so.
But also they recognize what you can do and they're giving you those opportunities. And that's great. And again, you found a management that respects your talent. And
I know, I'm shocked. And also because I thought, even when I applied, I even put in my notes, because I have this list when I just got rejected for something. So I'll put rejected, but I have a list of things I apply to. And I even remember putting in parentheses, long shot. And then I had this 2 interviews and I had a writing test. And then I got it. I'm like, well, I'll probably just like write and produce and cut up audio. And then they're saying, you know, oh no, why don't you record this? Oh, you sound good. You should do this. Oh, go on the air live with so-and-so. I'm like, whoa, this is the dream. I mean, now the real dream would be to host some kind of show on the weekend or whatever, but it's so great. I'm telling you, it's really true that if you keep at something, you could find what you like to do.
Agreed. No, I agree. A bunch of my college radio station friends during COVID, we had this big Zoom call where there was like 15 of us, and everyone was just going through the list of, well, what happened after school? And most of them were like, well, I tried to do radio on air for a year and it didn't work out, so I got into this business. I got into that business. And I'm like, yeah, I've been in radio for almost 30 years now. It was before I got let go. And I'm like, you know, I'm the dope that decided to stay in, and despite the bad pay and lack of opportunities, like you say, I love what we do, and I consider the podcast to be no different than broadcasting. It's just narrowcasting, and it's wonderful to be able to do it on my own terms. I don't have a program director that I have to answer to. It's my own taste, and like I said, if I want to talk to Jesse Rogers about covering baseball, which is not at all have anything to do with geek culture, I don't care. I'm doing it. And it's really freeing. And it's wonderful to discover that I have an audience, again, that understands and likes what I do. I met Selene Thomas is a producer and radio, or in film and television. And she works with this guy, Frank Miller. And you might know Frank Miller's name from the Sin City movies of the early aughts. But also big comic book writer, he wrote the script for RoboCop 3. I know it's the third movie, but still, and has done he made other movies as well and other television. And Selene, like yourself, and it means a lot when broadcast people or filmmakers and TV producers are like, no, you do a good job. We like the way you sound. We like the way you conduct an interview. Well, when you, just like you at GN, when you get that kind of affirmation from professionals, and I really appreciate just my boots on the ground, listening and viewing audience. But when pros get what you do, and especially much like you, Margaret, a good portion of my career were people that were satisfied by my job, but weren't blown away by me. Certainly didn't give me on-air opportunities. First 10 years at the Score, I did. But really the next 20 years, it was mostly behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And also in some, especially immediately after the Score, I was at, it's not a network that exists anymore, Sporting News Radio. I had a program director that actively tried to keep me off the air. And thankfully, enough of the on-air people are like, John's really good. I don't know what your problem is with him.
Why did he try to keep you off the air?
He didn't like me on a very personal level.
Okay.
Thankfully, he was only one of 3 program directors. And the other 2 are like, you're nuts. Like, let John. And all I was doing on Sporting News Radio on this national network, when I would be on the air, would cover boxing. And I did have this legitimate resume of covering boxing in a writing capacity for Ring Magazine and Boxing Illustrated. And I remember my first, and I'm sure I've told you this story before, but my first meeting with this guy, he had come from Las Vegas. And he said, well, I spent my last 5 years in Las Vegas, the #1 boxing capital of the world, and I've never heard of you. And I said, well, during those 5 years, I've been in Chicago, the 3rd largest market in the country, and I've never heard of you. Right. And he's like, how dare you? And I'm like, well, you just insulted me.
Right.
You think I'm just going to take that? I'm like, come on, man. And then we were, so certainly we didn't have a good first impression of each other. And that guy, by the way, no longer in broadcasting. And meanwhile, I guess technically I'm not in broadcasting.
No, you're in media.
Doing WordBalloon, so I feel like I won.
No, because that's the thing is, I remember I was working before when I was working in a major radio station. Somebody was deriding bloggers. I'm like, I don't know where you've been, but bloggers are taking over newspapers, and newspapers are actually crumbling because of bloggers. And I wasn't talking about, this was in 1999. This was like 2010, 2012. So I'm like, you're so myopic,
Yes. Well, that is the other problem with a lot of people that have spent most of their career in broadcasting. Yeah. They are in the rat maze, and they have no understanding beyond the box that they've been living in and the bubble and can't see beyond broadcasting. And then some have resigned themselves to, because I remember Hubbard bought a third or bought into the company Podcast One. And they had this massive meeting at their home base in Minneapolis.
When was this?
2014 or 15.
Okay, so they're already sort of late to the game, but go ahead.
Well, yeah, yes. And they're like, okay, anybody in the company that has podcast experience is invited to this meeting. So I went. And one of the big executives, someone that we have discussed off the air many times that I'm not a big fan of, one of the podcasters from one of the other markets, because Hubbard owned a lot of stations across the country. And they're like, well, you know, what is radio doing to attract new listeners? And this executive said, well, unfortunately, it really is more about like retaining the audience we have and trying to keep them. And it's
this
like,
person was an executive. Okay.
yes,
That's like
and still,
zero marketing.
by the way, still is an executive at one of the major broadcasters here in the city. And it's like, you myopic boob.
But also, you're not, if you're an executive, you should be concerned about marketing, which every executive at any media organization cares about.
All I can tell you is because of his broadcast experience, the guy keeps getting hired to bigger and more important jobs. Now, he might retire soon. I have no idea what his plan is. And I don't really care because, again, I feel very much like David to their Goliath and their myopic points of view of, well, you know, let's hold on to the audience and stuff. I mean, there would be times when they would want to make a personnel change on these radio stations and they would go to semi-retired DJs to hire them as opposed to finding the next new cool thing. And it's like, man, you guys do not get it. And that's fine. I mean, it's, what are you going to do? Again, rather than have to work for them and put up with their idiocy, I'm so glad to be out of broadcasting and doing my own thing. And it's like, let those rats keep banging their heads against the maze, trying to get to that one piece of cheese. I'm out here in the open air. And yeah, I'm fending for myself and boom or bust, feast or famine, but I am much more comfortable pursuing my goals on my own than I would working for the man. So, and
I am working for the man, and it is so enjoyable. Now, but remember, I didn't spend 30 years in radio like you did because I didn't get into radio until my late 30s.
Okay.
So I already did so much stuff. I mean, and also if anybody goes to my LinkedIn, Margaret Larkin, it is so crazy. And I didn't even list all my experience there. Because, and also when I left radio at the end of 2022, and then I applied in February, I'm hot too. I applied in February, or March or whatever it was. I knew that I wanted to get into it because first of all, also working in a newsroom, there's nothing like it. Like, let's say there's a press conference and it's going on. This is what's happened. And they'll say, Margaret, get on the air and talk about it, which is during the newscast. I'll do that. Or if something breaks, some news breaks and the anchor's got to do news at 11:30 a.m. He'll say, can you get that in by 11:30? I've got 8 minutes. Yes, right. I can, which, you know what I'm saying? Nothing is like it.
That you're right. No, it's that energy and excitement of doing live broadcasting. And that was my great feeling of all those years at the Score and having to react to, oh my God, Walter Payton just died. We got to react to things like that. Or, oh my God, this was, someone just pitched a no-hitter, whatever it is. It is that immediacy and spontaneity that was so energetic about live broadcasting.
And I don't know why so many markets don't have it. If I could do a show, it's so incredible to see what's going on in current events, and not be political about it. Just be like, oh my gosh, there's a bus crash. Okay, it's so exciting to bring that to the listener.
But also don't forget there are states and cities, and forgive me for picking, I don't mean to sound like I'm picking on these states, Montana, the Dakotas, where maybe a lot isn't happening the way it does in a city like Chicago, where there are so many things beyond politics.
But life is happening. So for instance, let's say that it doesn't even have to be like tied to some big news story. It can be like, oh, hey, Joe is, he's on a tractor in the middle of this field Joe, what's it like? Oh, it's like this. Wow, really? Okay, I mean, you can. It's just interacting with the listeners, and
No, I agree. The guy, I can't think of his name. The guy that really back in the 30s through I think the 50s that traveled across the country to find folk music in each town.
oh my gosh.
You know what
Okay,
I'm
because
talking
I'm thinking about one thing about the other guy from the New York record company, maybe Columbia, who traveled in the South to get R&B, or like blues,
Sure.
and I forgot his name.
Yeah,
That was
I know.
before that.
No, but you're right about, yeah, exactly. But people like that understood that beyond what was happening in the big cities, there's a lot of interesting music being created throughout the country and stuff. So no, I agree with you. I don't know how special, and again, forgive me sitting in Chicago thinking like this, I don't know how special it is in Montana talking to the tractor guy. I don't know. I don't. And well, you might remember a few years ago, there was a massive oil spill on one of the big interstate highways in, I believe, the Dakotas. And the police and government services went to the local radio stations and go, hey, you got to tell this story. This is a bad situation. They should not be on this interstate. And nobody in the local market was live on the radio. It was all voice track or syndicated programming. That's a problem. And it's like, hey, you need to have at least one person on duty that can go on with that kind of emergency information. And that's a concern. And I mean, it's so not only from an entertainment standpoint, but a necessary information. And that's why, as much as I worry about local programming, there will always be a need for local news and information. And that's why I felt after the various radio jobs I had to close out at a news station like WBBM, the CBS affiliate here in Chicago. I'm like, well,
it's not a CBS. I mean, CBS sold. It's now Odyssey.
Right. It's part of an Odyssey.
But when you were there, it was CBS.
Right. Right now, it's shorthand for people who may not know Odyssey. And right. You're right. They sold in 2018. CBS sold all of its radio assets to Entercom, which became Odyssey. Here we are.
And then also, but they do run, I just want to say, they do run CBS National News. So they are in that way affiliate.
Yes. So, and again, they were one of the original owned and operated CBS radio stations. So the shorthand that I give people, because they might not know what Odyssey is, even though Odyssey, I think, does put its name out there and stuff. It's like, yeah, I worked for CBS on and off for 15 years aggregately over my 30-year broadcast career. I spent 10 years there with XRT and The Score. They were CBS stations. And then the last 4 or 5 years with BBM. So, yeah.
Okay, here's a topic that Max Armstrong, he's an agricultural broadcaster, legend, amazing guy, wonderful man. And here's a topic that does affect smaller markets. It is farmer mental health.
Yeah.
And that has not really been discussed much. So let's just go back. Let's say that there was a lot of local outlets active live all these years. I think that farmer mental health would have come out sooner, because they would have looked into it. They would have talked to the community, and they would have said, hey, we have this situation. What's your experience? And they could have tapped into it. But now we had to wait a while. Now people are coming out. There's some articles here and there. Maybe NPR probably has done something. I don't know.
Yeah, I think, I mean, and really it was more about an economic need. But I do think that concern about the local and independent farmers started with Farm Aid back in the 80s. And I do think a byproduct of that is the mental health of farmers now and what they're going through. So unfortunately, it was a slow evolution. Again, unfortunately, not very sexy for New York and LA.
No,
they don't really give a shit about that. Pardon my swearing. Hope it's okay. I'll try not to. But yeah, it's no, you're right about that. And again, it's that flyover country mentality that keeps important issues like that from getting. Also, again, one of the economic concerns of Farm Aid was corporate farming versus local farming. And thank God there were enough legitimate musicians that had voices that are like, hey, this is real. Mellencamp and Bob Dylan and Willie Nelson and all these other great artists. God, I got to talk to Lou Reed. I interviewed Lou Reed for Farm Aid back in the 80s when I was down in Bloomington. You mentioned Max. It's, I mean, obviously a big voice on WGN, and also GN being a 50,000 watt station covering a good portion of the country.
Well, he's not officially there anymore, but yeah, he was there.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. But yeah, part of the Illinois Farm Bureau and stuff. And I know from McLean County, the county from central Illinois where Bloomington rests and everything. Oh, Max is as big as Howard Stern or Rush Limbaugh, anybody. I mean, like you said, the guy is an icon in the broadcast agricultural sphere, and rightfully so. And of course, his mentor, Orion Samuelson, another massively important broadcaster for, the heartland. And it's, these guys are important voices.
Now, some other issues that are that should be live and local in smaller areas are raising kids. Schools are huge.
Sure.
And then also gardening, agricultural innovation, if there are farmers, but even jobs, because they may not even know about some new company or some even controversial things like certain outside interests suddenly popping up and affecting your community. But there are a lot of things to look into. And I think that the great thing about live and local is you do find out. Also, another thing is if people are going to be on the air and they just hang out in a restaurant or whatever and they talk to people, then they will find stuff out. So they can tap into that.
You're right. And I know in Bloomington, Illinois, there's a full service radio station. That's what it's classified as. Just like WGN is here in Chicago, WJBC, very tied to the community. Little things like a show called Problems and Solutions, where literally it was a phone-in show. And I mean, it could even be just bartering for something. One person, somebody needs something, and then another person calls in and goes, "Hey, I got a ton of it. Take my number off the air and let's get in touch with each other and we'll help each other out." I mean, that's beautiful. And that was the ambition of radio at its beginnings. There were the charlatans, there were the snake oil salesmen, there were the huckster religious people as well. But you're right. I mean, that is my worry, is that local radio and television has strayed away from what its mandate was from the FCC, but also its value to the community. And I hate to see these things become an afterthought. I mean, you likely saw the same headlines I did when I mentioned the consolidation that was happening in the 90s and all these massive companies buying these big, television and radio networks and stuff. Well, like I said, CBS sold to Entercom 5 years ago. Bob Iger, in the midst of this strike talk with the WGA and the Screen Actors Guild and AFTRA, is talking about maybe ditching ABC. And that's like,
what? Okay.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, wait a minute.
Why?
That's one of the major networks. But they'll keep ESPN because sports is still a moneymaker. But they see that people aren't watching network television like they did even 10 years ago, even 5 years ago.
Do they know why? Why is that?
Well, I think because, again, there are more interesting options on cable and streaming than there are in broadcast. Good Lord. I mean, and right now, and I understand there are a few options, and usually in the summer anyway, but look at the game shows and reality shows that pepper all four major networks versus scripted entertainment. And again, right now with the writer's strike and the actor's strike, well, they got to be careful. And they're even moving schedules of shows that would have started in the fall because of the strike. They're moving to 2024. Because
but also remember that reality shows are also sort of scripted. Like they have setups, because I've met people in WGA who are sort of writers for those things. So.
Yeah, but they're under different rules, both from most importantly, from a money standpoint. And that's why they can exist. But yeah, it's, I don't know. I don't need to watch Jeopardy in prime time on ABC for an hour, or you name your favorite game show currently that they're all playing with, or the cooking contests on Fox, or, whatever, or 5 Days of Dateline on NBC or whatever they're showing.
Oh, I like Dateline. Yeah.
That's your problem.
Well, but also real true crime is really popular, actually.
Yes, it is. Well, and again, also finding an even more, I don't know. I guess it was hand in hand, because I think true crime has also found its place on the podcast platform.
Oh yeah, totally.
And look at, the great podcast success was Serial.
Yeah, yeah.
A true crime show that absolutely going viral. It's interesting. Look at what goes viral now.
Serial brought podcasting to a whole other level. Absolutely,
it did. 100% it did. And again, I would say Mark Maron from an interview standpoint did. God, especially when he got President Obama while in office to come to his garage in whatever LA sub city that he was in, Culver City, whatever it was. Yeah. And again, it's like, well, because Mark has an audience and Obama's looking to connect with that audience and stuff. No,
Well,
go ahead.
No, I was gonna say one thing is, you're always talking about these shows. So you're always trying to, this is off the air, of course, but you always say to me, oh, you should watch such and such. So I'll try watching such. I'm not gonna name any shows because actors and writers are very hardworking and so are directors. So I don't want to criticize anybody in particular or any show in particular. Okay, so let's go to the British stuff because I've been watching more British. I at first I had Acorn for a long time, and then I have BritBox, and I watch stuff on PBS.
Sure.
The acting is better. Okay. I know acting is very difficult. I am not dissing American actors. You guys are great. Thank you for your service. But I don't know what it is about the British actors that is different.
I don't know. I can't speak to the acting specifically. What I can speak to, though, is well, certainly the BBC broadcast model is very different than the American broadcast model. They, decades earlier, would be very satisfied making a show with a 6-episode season.
Yeah.
Their economic model is different. And having interviewed many American and British producers and writers and actors, most television shows are produced at a loss, and they really don't recoup their money until they get into syndication.
But I thought ITV is commercial, more commercial.
Well, it is, but that's different from the BBC. That's the thing, ITV. And there might be another independent British network that I'm not aware of, but you're right. No, but and also it's
You're thinking of Sky News, or is that? Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say that, like, the BBC is publicly funded. You have to purchase a licensing fee to the money goes to the BBC. So, and I believe they also still run advertising as well. So they've got a couple different revenue streams. I was speaking, I won't name the actor, but I was at a comic convention, and this prominent actor that people would know had a very successful show on basic cable. And he was telling me that midway through, the show ran for either 5 or 7 seasons. After the 3rd season, it was time for him to renegotiate his contract. Well, he was in a position of power because the show was doing so well, not only in North America, but it was produced in Canada, but it was running down here on this basic cable channel, but also internationally. So the company that produced the show was making a lot of money globally. That business model has changed because of streaming. And I think a lot of the opportunities to syndicate and make back the money that they were willing to put up front, that has gone away. So that's one of the reasons why I think we're seeing shows that have less episodes. And it's shocked me that it hasn't happened more on a grand level with the big 4, Fox, ABC, NBC, and CBS, that they haven't gone to that model as well. But it might be because, again, it's too expensive. I also remember the former CEO of CBS complaining that they made CSI, and they laid out the money for it, and the basic cable channels that were running the reruns were making almost as much money as CBS was, but didn't have the cost of producing it.
True.
So CBS was still operating at a loss.
Well, that's like Google making money off of newspaper original ideas, original stories.
Yep. I mean, that's again, it's a complicated media world that only continues to get more complicated, and that's why the WGA and the actors are on strike. Is, well, we're not getting our fair share.
But do you think that they could get a fair share, because it's so different? Because now there's not really syndication, as you said. So what does a fair share look like?
Well, I think that's what's being negotiated right now, because the studios will argue that we're not getting the revenue streams we used to because of the changes in media. The actors and the writers will say, we're only asking for 5% more of what you're paying us aggregately, across the board. And it is a significant amount of money, but compared to the profits, the only major studio that is operating in the red is Warner Brothers. And that's because of all the changes in hands and also overspending on their part. But every other studio, despite their moans, they all showed profits because
what happened to Warner Brothers? What happened? Why aren't they?
I wish I could give specifics, but obviously Warner Brothers has changed hands so many times over the last 25 years. AOL bought them back in the day, Time Warner. Then they went to AT&T. Now they're with Discovery Channel. And unfortunately, certainly AT&T and Discovery acquired them with deficit, results right now. And that's why the Batgirl movie was just written off, even though it cost them $90 million. It was cheaper for them to take the loss and not release it than put it out there and see how it did. And yet they're still spending money on things that don't succeed. The Flash movie cost like $300 million to make, and it's at a loss. God, that even a smaller thing, the recent Jennifer Lawrence raunchy comedy that she just made, I see that's already available to purchase online, and that was only in the theaters like a month ago. I mean, it's what's happening.
Sometimes they do that on purpose as well, because don't they put certain things in the theater so they can be up for awards?
Yes, but ultimately they want financial, recoup on their money. So no, my God, you remember too when movies would be out for months or if not a year. I mean, I remember as a little kid, Star Wars was in the theaters for like 2 years before they finally let go. The Blues Brothers, I remember again, late 70s, but that was out for like a year. Yeah. And now movies have like a gestation period in the theaters of maybe 2 months.
Well, because the distribution is different, and obviously there are more outlets now. But this is what I told you offline. I'll say it now. I'll reiterate is now it's almost like we're going back to the early days of movies, because it used to be that these guys used to go out to LA, to Orange County or whatever, in the Orange Fields, Orange Field, whatever it's called, Orange Groves, and they set up these studios, and then they filmed, and they were these little rickety production companies. And then they created movies and they had distribution, and then that was it. So it's almost like the streaming is similar, because you have this stuff online and then that's it.
Well, and again, unfortunately, COVID, I think, accelerated what was already happening in general, in that before COVID and before streaming, it was like, I don't need to see that in the theater. I'll wait a year. It'll be on cable. I'll watch it then. Well, then streaming happened, and then COVID happened, and it closed down the theaters. And it's like, oh my God, we've got this like massive backup of product that we need to get out there. Let's put them on the streamers.
Yeah.
And I think people got in the habit of watching at home. People have giant screens. They have giant sound systems. They can recreate that theater experience without the putz that's on his phone or the idiot that won't shut up.
Right.
And it's just more convenient to watch movies. And now all of a sudden, hey, come back to the movies. Everything's great now. And it's like, I don't know how to break it to you, but that romantic comedy, I don't need to see it on a 20-foot screen. I'd be very happy just watching it at home. And you guys have set up this model that all I have to do is sit and wait. I didn't see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 until a couple of weeks ago when it popped up on Disney Plus, because I'm like, I don't have time. I haven't seen Barbie or Oppenheimer yet. Yeah. And I mean, of the two, I kind of want to see Oppenheimer a bit more than Barbie. With no disrespect to Barbie, that's amazing, the amount of work of business that it's doing. Yeah. And that's great. I think those are anomalies, though. I don't think.
Well, and also Barbie's a worldwide brand, and they've done marketing. Don't they have a marketing budget of $1 trillion or something? I don't know.
Something ridiculous. No, you're right. And that, by the way, that's the thing that people don't take into account when it's like, why is a movie like $300 million? It's like, well, $100 million of that is just marketing.
Oh yeah,
purely. But no, you're right about that. As far as brand association with Barbie, it's an easy sell. For decades, it's been, little girls and I'm sure some little boys' choice in terms of toys and stuff. So they're curious to see what's going to happen. And it is, again, it's an outlier. I'm amazed at Oppenheimer, and I kind of love that kids combine the two and are like Barbenheimer, and they want to see both. Hey, that's awesome. I mean, sometimes
the thing about popular culture is you really don't know what's going to happen, because who would think that people would do the Barbenheimer thing? It's just it could have been like some trend online that became something. It's sort of like Betty White becoming popular.
It's popular in her 90s. Absolutely. No, William Goldman, the great screenwriter, said, nobody knows nothing. And it's true. It's absolutely true. And that's why even the failures of television and film, nobody sets out to make a bad movie or a bad TV show. And I say this about comic books. I mean, nerds can get angry just about comics as much as they do about TV and film. And I'm always like, well, the guy didn't realize he was writing a story that wasn't going to click with the audience. They were trying something different, or whatever. Or the other thing now is the studios play it very safe. Dean Devlin, who made Independence Day and Stargate back in the 90s and
Love
stuff.
Stargate.
A very successful television producer to this day. And he was on a documentary show that was on the CW about 1982, but he was talking about the modern day. And he said, I have a movie idea. I shopped it around all the studios, and the consensus was, this is great, we'll never make it. And he's like, why not? They're like, well, it's not based on anything. And now it seems like a lot of studios are playing it safe. And in the case of Barbie, would rather make something based on a brand. I mean, all these movies that are based on toys, the Transformers, G.I. Joe, Barbie, all that stuff. It's like, really? And it's like, I get it because of the brand awareness, but it's like, all right, thank God Barbie's actually good and did really well. And I suppose the Transformer and G.I. Joe movies saw their success initially as well, but it's also diminishing results as we're on the 8th G.I. Joe movie or Transformers movie. Look at Indiana Jones. I mean, my God, Indiana Jones is like a no-brainer for the first 4 movies. And I liked Indy 5. I liked Dial of Destiny. I thought it was a really good movie, but I also respect a kid going, I don't want to watch an 80-year-old Harrison Ford running around. I don't care.
Yeah, you really have to tap into nostalgia to make that successful, in my personal opinion. However, it could have been a success if some let's say somebody got on TikTok and they started replicating some things from that movie. The people are like, oh, that's cool. It's sort of like why some older music is becoming popular, because people are playing it online.
That's fair. That's fair.
Like, why are they into this 1985 song? Oh, because people are doing it on TikTok.
When it comes to music, I do find it interesting because certainly hip hop and urban music has replaced rock and roll. And it's weird because I remember growing up in the 80s and seeing my father still love big band music from the 40s, but it was 40-year-old music. And now that's me loving Tom Petty, enjoying a 40-year-old song. And it's like, well, it's, again, it doesn't age as much as big band music did, but still it's 40-year-old music. And it surprises me that music, not just based on nostalgia, but that kids are still enjoying it. I find that interesting. I don't have an answer for that. And also it surprises me that they're out there. There are new bands that are still making music. I listen to music services that provide modern alternative rock and pop and things like that. And I'm glad that stuff still exists. But yeah, it is interesting. I mean, music tastes change, and I'm not against it, but it is interesting to see what.
Well, and also now music is, because it used to be more R&B based or country based or whatever, and now the reference point is global. So you can mix all these different things together. Plus, I think there's more power in the producer now. Like people made a big deal out of the producer of the Beatles. Okay, well, we got like that times like 50 now. We got so many producers who are bringing things in.
Well, and also remixing. Club music existed in the 70s and 80s as well, but it really does feel like that has become more dominant. And EDM, again, showing my age, K-pop, Korean pop, and electronic music and stuff. It's interesting how that has kind of replaced traditional rock and roll, 3-chord rock and roll and everything. I don't know. I don't know about you, but I always felt, especially coming from a radio music background, I'm like, well, I'll never be one of those old guys that doesn't understand what's happening or anything. Hey, how you doing? I don't understand what's happening.
I do. I mean, I like the new stuff. I'm into the new stuff. I like the producing. I mean, because I'm listening to like really obscure techno electronica on Twitch. I mean, it's very niche, very niche.
No. But and I when I discover it, I find things that I like.
Yeah.
So I'm not against it. I don't follow it voraciously as I did. Again, in the last years of traditional top 40, where Dean Martin's Everybody Loves Somebody Sometimes replaced the Beatles at #1 on the pop charts, when every music was fair game, country, Montalbani and his string instrumentals and things like that. Then in the 80s, radio got segmented, and you had the country station and the hit station and whatever. And now even more. It's again, it's a divided world, much like whatever they want to hear from a spoken word content thing. People are just interested in the music they're into, and some of them
also it's a time, because when people get older, there are a lot of responsibilities people have, and plus their energy is put towards different things. So you need energy to discover new music and to really dig in.
You're right. No,
You
you're
know?
absolutely right.
Or you need the focus. But I was gonna say one thing. Okay, so one thing I really didn't hit upon, I sort of touched upon it, was the fact that you and I have been podcasting for a while. Okay, so I want to put this on the record because, and I know I've said this in other places, but I really want to say that for the people who are doing podcasting and they think they're so great and they're like, hey, I'm doing this thing, podcasting, I'm doing live streaming. Hey, look at me, I'm live. And we've been live. Okay. We've been live broadcasting, we've been in broadcasting, and we started podcasting. Okay. So one time I was talking to somebody and this person was relatively new to podcasting. And this person said, oh yeah, well, you're homegrown. Okay. It was a diss. Okay.
What does that mean? Homegrown.
It was a diss. It was like a backhanded compliment.
Yeah,
well,
but
because I started podcasting because I do my own thing. I do my own live streaming. I do my own podcasting. I do my own editing. I do my own booking. I do my own everything.
Right.
Okay. Well, okay. So let's put it out here that when we started, there was no podcasting machine. There was no live streaming machine. There was no big marketing machine for digital.
Right.
So we had to do it ourselves.
Of course.
And I'm saying this for people who think that anybody older than 28 is clueless. Okay. Because we're not just older saying, okay, hey, back in my day, we're saying we were the ones and we are still the ones. And let's get some respect. Because I notice in the business, people don't really respect that.
Yeah, screw them. They don't get it. Both the people that are younger than us and also the broadcast people, like I said, that are in their bubble or in their rat maze and can't look outside of that. Fine. Let them have their stupid opinions. Okay, boomer. Is the most ignorant hashtag I've ever seen.
Didn't that come from a Reddit thing, or where'd that come from?
Oh, I don't even know where it originated.
Okay.
I don't care.
Right.
But if all you can say to someone who is older than you that, well, you're older than me, so therefore your opinions don't matter, that only shows their immaturity and lack of understanding.
Right.
And in fact, many people are identified as okay boomer that aren't baby boomers. Right. They're younger than that. They're Gen X or even William Shatner got the okay boomer from somebody. He's like, actually, I'm older than that. I was in the 30s, but whatever, and it's like, it's insane. Or God, I don't want to do the math, but yeah, it's like, it only shows a lack of maturity and understanding. Fine, go play.
Well, that's why I like where I work. And I mean, I know in public, I'm speaking publicly, but I've been there enough months because I had a 3 months, you're on probation for 3 months and then you're released from probation. But I've been at the station and the company long enough to say, in my experience, they're not operating like that, because actually my experience is helping me. And they're like, hey, this is good. And more experienced people are saying, no, we want you a part of this because, you can do it. But at other places, I've seen people being dissed who are more experienced, or the people who are older dissing people a similar age because they're clueless. So they assume anybody their age is clueless. And it's
again,
like, no,
they're uninformed. And also, forgive the generalization, but I have heard not just in broadcasting, but in work environments in general, with things that younger people are doing, like quiet quitting, and obviously not putting a full.
And is that really a thing?
Yeah, not putting a full 8 hours effort in their work. And they're finding, actually it's the older employees that understand and appreciate the value of having a job and are giving a fair effort in their 8 hours. And that's reassuring because, as I say, I understand. And it's always been since the 50s when advertisers in particular discovered teenagers had a disposable income and they started to cater media specifically towards a younger audience. And it's evolved since then. Go from the 50s and Elvis to Britney Spears in the late 90s into the early aughts. And I mean, again, you see the Taylor Swift, another great example of that. Again, that's fine. But when they do it to the exclusion of the older audience or other audiences in general, all they're doing is missing an opportunity, either working with these people, catering to them in an entertainment capacity, all of that. And I think that's fine. They're going to be stupid. They're leaving money on the table, or they're leaving resources on the table. Goodbye. Fine. Make your mistakes. Fail. And that's okay. Run your own race, as I said about Jesse Owens. It's absolutely true. I don't care. I don't get offended. I'm indifferent. I laugh and I mock them because they don't know what they're missing. Thankfully, there's enough of an audience and the rest of us in the world that do appreciate what we do. So, you know.
Well, and also if you go to C2E2, I mean, you and I both went to C2E2
Yeah.
this year. Wait, was it this year? Yeah, it was.
Yeah, it was this year.
And there were a number of older people there, and I thought, wow, okay. And let's just be honest here. There are a number of people who are older than me who are at least millionaires, and they're like, shh, they're like quiet, wealthy.
Uh-huh.
Because they're like, oh, I'm doing this trip, this, and I'm like, wait, I'm doing the math. I'm like, dang, man, I can't afford them. Like, oh yeah, they're wealthy, but they're like quiet. And then so
Right.
they're the ones, yeah. So people cater, if people market to those people, they'll do well.
Absolutely. No, you're
But they're
right.
skipping
And
over.
I get mad at like Adam Carolla and Bill Maher make fun of nerds. And they're like, get over your childish, like, interests and
Even
stuff.
today they do that.
Oh, yeah. And it's like, we're having fun. We're not,
Yeah.
and listen, it's a broad stroke when you talk about the geek culture. And there are immature people in that sphere. But there are also people that just are entertained by this. And especially with all the pressures of modern society, it's just fun escapism. I will never dress as a superhero. And because as C2E2, for people who may not know that listen to you, it's, big nerd culture convention.
Yeah.
It's people that are dressing up like superheroes and fantasy characters.
It's fun.
It is fun. But also, you and I didn't dress up. We just came for the environment and the fun of it. And just kind of people watching. And also in my case, too, some of my favorite writers and artists and performers, actors and filmmakers and TV makers and stuff, they're there talking about their product. I like that. I like learning more about that. And that's why I go to these conventions. Then they're fun. And the people that make fun of them, okay, again, you're uninformed and you don't get it. And that's fine. Go enjoy your fantasy football group, which I have nothing against as well. But I mean, that's the thing. It's like, there are people that really, it's all this tribalism of, well, if I don't like what you like, then you don't like me. And it's like, no, it's fine. But their thing is, oh, a bunch of those nerds, I don't like that stuff. So therefore I don't like them. Okay, but you're kind of stupid. But again, that's your issue. It's not mine.
Well, yeah, it's also sort of like the thing that I've told you before is people will say, okay, so we were around when the internet started and we are still on the internet. Shocking. That's my phone. We are still on the internet, shockingly. And then people will talk to me and they'll be like, well, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, yeah, I know these things. I was around the internet before you were. And it's like, they don't, and you said it yourself. It's almost like it didn't exist. Or what'd you say? It didn't exist.
Yes. That's what I was going to tell you in response to that. Sometimes the response is, well, that was before I was born. And it's like, that doesn't mean it didn't happen, because a lot of times someone will create something that has been influenced by something that happened before.
Right.
And I mean, my shorthand is, wow, Spider-Man loving Mary Jane Watson. This is the first time that's ever happened. And it's like, you hate to be that nerd. Actually, in the 70s, they had that story. Well, that happened before I was born. It's like, yeah, but it happened. And that was the inspiration of this new thing. You're right. No, unfortunately. And again, I hate to generalize, because I have met some really smart young people that do appreciate what's come before and are intellectually curious about things. My buddy Rob Burnett brought up being born after Jurassic Park. Try to watch a Ray Harryhausen Clash of the Titans stop motion claymation special effects movie from them, and they can't wrap their heads around it. Or even earlier, King Kong, or in the 60s, 1 million BC, and some of those things. It's like, no, that you give that to a kid and it's like, this is so cheap, this is so rinky-dink. And it's like, well, that's all they had. Those are the only resources they had. And if you can get past that, you could appreciate the story. I mean, God, Doctor Who was made on this shoestring budget in the 70s by the BBC. And literally sometimes the monster would be a stuffed animal. They would just put up really close. And that was supposed to be the alien monster, or bad rubber suits or whatever. And again, that's all we had, but we saw beyond the visual and appreciated the story. And it's like, well, this is all they've got to work with. But the ideas behind the stories and the performances would carry us through the cheapness or whatever.
Well, that's like when my husband likes to watch that older channel, like these older stories from the early 60s, late 50s. And they had cheap sets and stuff, but the acting is so good.
Yes.
Like all the people, even Andy Griffith, like that show, but a lot of those older shows, I don't know what they did. It's like almost like the acting was better than now, because they knew that they had to convey something. They had this character and they had to inhabit the character. and they conveyed the character, and now they have like so many special effects. I'm wondering if it makes people not reach as far or something.
I can't speak to modern writing. I mean, and I agree with you. And also, by the way,
But it's the acting I'm talking about. Yeah.
well, or even the acting as well. There were only 3 networks, so I think the pool to get on the air was much smaller. So you had to be better to make it.
Okay.
And again, as great as the actors are, I always go back to writing. To me, writers are the keepers of story and character. And as great as actors are, they're only as good as the words they're given. The new Star Trek actors are exceptional actors. They are getting bad scripts, in my opinion. They're getting bad characterization reads from these scripts, in my opinion. And when I read what the experience is of the writers, they are not science fiction writers. They are coming from CW teen romance shows, the Carrie Diaries, Riverdale, Nancy Drew. And then they're asked to write science fiction. And so they go to the obvious big science fiction hits. And right now on Star Trek Strange New Worlds, they reintroduced an alien race that was in the 60s called the Gorn, a lizard group. But the modern producers have really turned them into alien knockouts from the Aliens movies. And the blatant ripoffs of shot moments and other suspense moments that are lifted from these other films and television shows. And Star Trek, starting in the 60s, was the innovator, and other shows would imitate them. And now instead, in modern Star Trek, they're imitating these other past.
Well, like I call it Friends in Space.
100%.
A lot of new Star Trek stuff. And I mean, again, everybody works really hard. You have to diet severely. Okay. So, I respect your hard work, actors, writers, everybody. But what as a consumer though, I find it like, okay, like I live near the Gold Coast. I walk over to the Gold Coast. I go to a restaurant. It's like Star Trek in a restaurant. It's like, is the restaurant in Star Trek? I mean, the way that people talk, like the women are like this. And, oh my gosh, like, what are we gonna do? And it's like, wait, seriously? That's what you're coming up with?
Yeah, okay. No, you're right about. Well, and again, my friend Rob Burnett is one of my favorite people online. He's a YouTuber, big geek culture observer, but also a guy that has worked for the studios in various capacities, both as a director and editor, other jobs as well. And he's right. Modern audiences want to see themselves in modern television. That's what they want. They don't want aspirational characters that they hope to grow to be that might be superior to them. They get very happy about, to the most basic levels of, they're the same gender as me. Not just male, female, but obviously LGBTQ plus, and further, or even from a disability standpoint. I saw people talking about the Strange New Worlds modern Star Trek show, and they're like, well, we want to see more physically challenged representation. And even that word is now out of step. And I forget what the proper phrase is, so I apologize. I don't mean to offend anyone who might be in that capacity. The lead character, Christopher Pike, we know his future because he was presented to us in the original series as a quadriplegic. Beyond being a quadriplegic, couldn't speak and could only communicate in a binary yes-no way.
Wow. That
is his fate. I saw a trio of people critiquing Strange New Worlds, and that's part of the story, that Pike knows his future, that he's going to wind up in this terrible monosyllabic quadriplegic, can't speak anymore capacity. And one of the people was a physically challenged person who said, well, when you're physically challenged, life isn't over. You find ways to deal with it. And without trying to be disrespectful, my point was, no, it's not just that this guy is trapped in a chair. He can't talk.
Right.
He can't communicate. He can only say yes and no. He is trapped in this body. I think if you're in that extreme situation, because they're like, well, he shouldn't be bummed out about this fate. I don't know.
Because he used to be able to do everything physically. Well, but that goes back to the British acting that I'm talking about, because okay, so there's some more modern British shows that I watch, and I'm like, I know they're ticking the boxes, which I'm fine with, because the acting is so incredible. They've had literally people who are paraplegic, people who have, I think, Down syndrome actors. I've had seen all kinds of actors in these shows. they rival any A-list actor in Hollywood. They're better.
I
See what I
understand.
mean?
No, I do.
So yeah, if you want to like have diversity on the screen, get the skills as well, and get the writing and get the everything, the production.
Well, and again, forgive the generalization, but it seems to me that the British are so, especially the acting communities and theatrical communities, both stage and on screen, there's more training. And I really do think there is. I
don't know I don't know the acting business, but as a consumer, I'm very satisfied. I walk away like I feel like my experience of art has been elevated.
Understood.
Even if I'm watching a cop show. Like for instance, you're talking about the tech. Like, so for instance, I'm going back to Morse, which is, it was made
Dr.
in the
Morse.
mid-80s.
Yeah.
So now I'm on season 2.
Cool.
And yes, it's really hokey. Their camera work and their music and the lighting, it's really hokey, but the acting is good and the storytelling is good. And that's what I'm saying, is that this is also an old concept, is if you have good storytelling, you can have good content.
Well, and John Thaw, isn't he Morse?
Yeah.
Yeah, John, I mean, he goes back to at least the 70s, if not the 60s, and just kind of grew. And by the time he was Morse, he was such an experienced actor. Think of like Denzel here, you go back to St. Elsewhere when he was brand new.
Oh, yeah.
And now in modern day and stuff, he's still an amazing actor and such command of his performances and things. Meryl Streep going back to the 70s and still killing it. So yeah, and also
I know it's like, but the thing is with British actors is they escape into their character, because there's some people I've seen in different contexts. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's that actor, but you can't tell. See, it seems like the American A-list actors, it seems like they're just themselves in each movie because people go to see them, the actor.
Yes.
No,
I agree with that. Again, it's a different economic world, Hollywood versus London. And I think because of that, they can't develop as some do as big personalities just on their own, and the movies and television shows become vehicles for their stardom, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But no, like I said, I do think there was more of an effort to train British actors that way. And then again, also the limited amount of episodes when you talk about television, where Inspector Morse may be 12 episodes in a season versus
or less. I think there are only 4 in the first season.
Well, that's I didn't even want to presume that, but you're absolutely right. And I remember asking, especially when I started WordBalloon, good friend of mine is Brad Meltzer, wonderful novelist, has had many.
Oh yeah, he's living the dream.
Yeah, well, and not only prior to his reality TV shows, he had a great show on the WB called Jack and Bobby. And I asked him, I said, well, why, at the time I'm watching British imports of shows that only had 4 or 6 episodes a season. And I'm like, if you only have that many good ideas, why knock yourself out to come up with 22 or 25 for an American season versus a British season? And again, the economics were different. And like I said, the studios would produce these shows at a loss, hoping to recoup their money in syndication. And that's
what about like things like The Honeymooners that didn't have syndication, right? They didn't.
Well, different. This was before reruns. The Honeymooners and I Love Lucy were the outliers. Everybody else was doing stuff live, and West Coast would only get kinescopes, those really bad looking photographs off a TV screen, and that's why they look so bad.
Yeah.
But Desi Arnaz and Lucy, coming from Hollywood, are like, no, we're going to put our stuff on film. And then they had the radical idea of telling CBS, we want to own the show. We'll take less money if, you give it, you sell it to us or whatever. And they were geniuses, because to this day, 70 years later, we're still watching those shows. And the same thing with Gleason. There's only that.
But didn't they risk, didn't they lose some of them? Because that's what I'm saying. I don't know. Did they know about syndication back then in 50s? I don't think it really existed, right? Or it didn't exist.
Well, all I know is obviously I Love Lucy was first. The Gleason show, The Honeymooners, was part of his variety show, and it was performed live. And even the classic 39 that are the stuff we see in syndication.
Yeah.
That stuff, they had a special camera that could film and broadcast live at the same time. It had 2 different lenses, and the Dumont network, or no, it was CBS. Pardon me. But regardless, that really was an innovation. And Gleason was very smart, and maybe with the example of Lucy and Desi, because it happened otherwise, he owned the films, and he even owned the kinescopes and the poorly shot when they got the Honeymooners lost episodes. That was a different syndication package initially, but Gleason owned it all. He owned his own content. Exactly. I mean, here we are, 70 years later, and we're using the lessons of Desi Arnaz and Jackie Gleason and Johnny Carson is another one. Own your show, because that's valuable, and it's never, there's always going to be an interest in it. And I'm glad, but no, reruns really didn't start happening until I believe the 60s. It might have been the late 50s.
Well, see, that's what I'm saying about the current thing. Because I mean, I know a lot of actors have made a lot of money because of syndication. If their show hit a certain amount of seasons, then they got syndicated and they made more money.
Sure.
But that was sort of like a discovery of unhidden wealth. You know what I'm saying? Because before then and after then, what'd they do? I mean, how'd they make the money? They
went on to the next project, and hopefully, a guy like here's a name that nobody's going to know. Bob Cummings had a bunch of TV shows and movies from the 50s through the 70s, as far as him being a star, and then would show up on the Love Boat maybe twice or three times a year in the 70s and 80s. But that guy went from the Bob Cummings show to Love That Bob to we had a show with Julie Newmar, who, by the way, turned 90 today and is still with us and still is amazing.
Wow.
But My Living Doll was this like ridiculous idea where he built a robot and Julie Newmar played the robot. So it's this, beautiful young woman and stuff. And it was, like an I Dream of Jeannie or a Bewitched or whatever. Now that show came and went. I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched still in syndication. I mean, it's hit and miss, and you don't know. But yeah, I mean, it was tougher before reruns happened, and even then, another strike resulted in residuals for the Screen Actors Guild when they went. The last time the writers and the actors were in strike together was 1960,
right?
And residuals came from that. But even then, it was only like, all right, if the show gets rerun 10 times, you'll get checks, and then that's it. None of the old Star Trek cast from the 60s show enjoyed residuals, until they got the first couple cycles, but that ran out in the early 70s.
Mm-hmm. Well, I was gonna say,
an exception was Audrey Meadows from the Honeymooners, Alice. She made a deal with I'm assuming Jackie Gleason's people or whatever. She asked for residuals back in the 50s, and everybody laughed. And it's like, yeah, whatever, good luck. Mm-hmm. And, had a very nice retirement because she was still making money from those reruns running all over the world.
Well, I was going to go back before I forget. I was going to go back to Morse and the actor who plays Morse. What I found out is he actually is from the northern England, which has a very different accent. And he's from a working class background. His dad was like, whatever.
Yep.
Worked in a manufacturer, I think. And I saw this thing, This Is Your Life online. And his dad is speaking. His dad is this like really rough northern accent. And I thought, wow, his son has gotten rid of that accent. And he plays this very sophisticated, not educated, not formally, but there's very sophisticated guy. And that's what I'm talking about. He's totally transformed his true northern background into this other kind of character. And it's very, to me, as a consumer, it's inspiring to see people be able to do that. And when I watch American stuff, I don't walk away like really inspired. I'm more like, wow, is she a model or something? Because she can't really act. I mean,
that you're right. And that is the difference between American television and British television. Yeah. Britons were more welcoming, and even the producers and filmmakers were looking for different looking people and weren't just into pretty people. But the Hollywood mentality for a long, long time, especially if you were a lead actor, was you were a pretty person. So I can appreciate that. I need to talk to somebody in Britain, in the British scene, and find out what's going on. That's fair. And yeah, you probably should. I mean, but also like look at Michael Caine, bloody Michael Caine, who talks like this, right?
Oh yeah.
And again, retained his working class accent, but still managed to cultivate this incredible career. And
although he did like
beautiful man, good looking guy,
No, remember there was that one, I don't know if you ever saw this interview with him. There was some interview with him, I forgot where it was, and he said he got this one he got this part because of how he looked, and it was a very upper class accent. He was playing a soldier or something.
Oh,
And in
probably
that one, he
Zulu.
does sound upper class.
Probably Zulu. Yeah, that movie. That was
Oh,
one of the
Zulu,
films,
yeah.
you know. And then of course the Rudyard Kipling adaptation that he did with Sean Connery, The Man Who Would Be King. No, I mean, again, no, I so hear what you're saying. And I mean, God, I can go through dozens of British actors I have nothing but admiration for because of their adaptability. God, Silence of the Lambs, Hopkins, Anthony Hopkins. Anthony Hopkins can play a very erudite character, and he can play a street level character. Sir Ben Kingsley, another excellent actor that will give you a very aristocratic role. Or God, one of my favorite movies from the late 90s called Sexy Beast with Ray Winsome, and he's this real street level, scary. I mean, he's this little twerpy guy. Ben Kingsley comes off scary as hell because he adopts this different accent and the actions that he does, and you're like scared to death of little twerpy Ben Kingsley. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know. Good
Okay, so
stuff.
anything else? Because we barely talked. I'm just joking.
Margaret, this is what happens when we're on the phone. This happens on WordBalloon all the time where we go more than 2 hours, and I love it. And again, this is what I love about podcasting. You're not confined, and everyone who tells you, "Oh no, keep it short, that's fine." And again, there's a place for micro content, but I really believe in long form, and I really think that people that will watch this and listen to this will get something out of it and appreciate the dialogue that we've had.
And without the segments, because we didn't do a clear thing like that you can split up.
Nope.
Because that's the thing. But everybody has their, because I know there's a business podcast and they have thousands of listeners, and I don't. So I mean, it's also because they were very focused thing. They segment, you know.
Absolutely. Well, you know, and I have advisors who are like, you ought to do more top 5 lists.
Oh,
and
really?
Like, yeah, well, again, that to me is like clickbait bullshit. Pardon me.
But also, so many people do lists.
Should it?
You'll just be one of many doing a list.
Right. Well, that's what I think. Well, but there's also a group that, and they're correct that, hey, if you want a successful podcast, or listen to or watch what others do, and at least emulate their form, be genuine, but emulate the form. And that's what this one guy who was trying to, you know, who is a successful podcaster, is like, hey, you should do this. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I like what I do. And again, I have enough confidence that despite the fact that there are many more people that want short form and want top 10 and top 5 lists, fine, go somewhere else for that stuff. I'm going to talk to the people that I want to talk to. I'm curious about their creative process. I'm curious about what they make. I want to know what they're thinking. And the great response that I get is a lot of these people will end up doing these nerd conventions around the world. And I have several cartoonist friends that very early on WordBalloon went to a couple Australian comic conventions. And they're like, you do know that there are people in Australia that are listening, because they'll say something like, I like making ships in a bottle. That's one of my hobbies. And then a ridiculous example, I know. But then they'll go to a convention, and while the guy's getting his comic books, you know, signed and wants to talk about Superman or Spider-Man, it's like, by the way, I heard you on WordBalloon. I put ships in a bottle. And the creator and the fan are excited, and they have another conversation on a tangent about putting ships in bottles. And it happens all the time. And that's great, because I want people to know more. I respect these nerd creators. And I think they're as important as your favorite novelist or filmmakers or television makers. And I think they are making content that resonates with an audience and deserve the respect that is just a foregone conclusion for novelists, television makers, and filmmakers. It's like, yeah, and there's a reason why Hollywood has woken up and gone, wow, there are like hundreds of comic book ideas that we've ignored for 70, 80 years that actually are very viable and could make interesting film and television in the right hands. We're seeing it now, and the geeks are inheriting the earth, if you will.
Well, also another thing is, luckily you did repost this. You mentioned this coming on Twitter, and your buddy in Ireland retweeted it, and I said, I'm Irish in name only, but I seriously want to go there. That's my number one chosen destination in Europe for sure. Well, and he's like, yeah, when you come over, let me know. I'm like, wait, does this guy mean it? Because I will contact him, you know.
He's a wonderful guy. I met Owen in 2018 at the New York Comic Convention. Prior to COVID, he's like, hey, I'd really like to get you to Dublin. to be at one of the conventions. I really love your show. And
Wow.
I was blown away. No, Owen has been an incredible ally to me in Ireland, not only getting me creators to interview on WordBalloon and opportunity, like I'm going to go to Dublin in March and everything, but he's even like
Wow.
drummed up sponsorship for me for my podcast. And I am stunned when he's like, oh no, John, honestly, like he teaches at this college, Pulse College, which is an animation and other media college, kind of like Columbia College here in Chicago. And they put on this convention twice a year and get these creative people, actors, filmmakers, novelists, and comic book people to do these conventions and speak to the students. And he's like, oh no, John, honestly, like a lot of people in Ireland, they know who you are and they listen. It's
Wow.
like, great.
Oh
So
my
I'm really looking
gosh. How
forward to
long are you going to be there in Ireland?
just a handful of days, but it's going to be enough. And it's great because
Oh my
I've
God.
become friends with several Irish cartoonists, and they've come to the States because they work for DC and Marvel. And I'm really looking. I mean, we've hung out here and had meals or hung out at bars or whatever, but it's going to be so great to be in their element. And in fact, my one friend Stephen Mooney, who's a great writer, great cartoonist, they just had their convention this past weekend, and Steve came and he's like, "Is John here?"
Oh, that's cool.
And Owen's like, "No, man, John's coming in March." It's like, "Oh, goddamn! All right, fine, whatever, you
Wow.
know." But actually, if I may tease on WordBalloon, I'm going to be presenting several panels. I have no involvement in them. It's Owen and other Irish moderators that are interviewing these people. But he got great people that absolutely will be part of the WordBalloon, the interest of the WordBalloon audience. And I love doing it. So no, we really,
Wow.
beyond just becoming nice, good acquaintances and stuff. No, he's helped me out very much from a content providing standpoint and a sponsor.
Well, if he needs somebody who's Irish in name only, then I will go as a representative. And you said it's in Dublin?
Yeah, the
Oh my
convention's in
gosh. You better
Dublin. I know.
You should
I
drink
know.
what's the famous beer?
Oh, Guinness, of course.
Guinness, yeah, because I've
Guinness
had
is
Guinness
Irish.
here in the US, but I'd like to try it over there. But
Oh,
yeah,
sure. No,
if he
and
needs any help, if he needs somebody to interpret Irish English to American English, I'm the person.
well, and in the and I won't go to detail, but I mean, I've told you this before. In the 90s, I used to do a lot of dialects, and I had a Irish Catholic character that I would do on the sports radio that was very critical of Notre Dame, Father Pat, and it really was that classic 1930s. Okay, Rocky, up against the wall, kind of gangster and
Yeah.
cop accent. And we actually had Guinness people come, and they were laughing their asses off. And I was so glad, because I'm like, the last thing I want to do is offend with some of my accent. But oh, John, you really know what you're doing. And I'm like, okay, great, man, thanks. So that was very lovely. And it really, it's a shame that society has gotten so sensitive, because I think there is a nice, pleasant way of teasing that is not meant to offend, but is just, hey, that you've got an interesting, different musicality to your accents. And I think that's part of the appeal that you might have with some of the British shows and actors that you love too. And like you said, I mean, pointing out John Thaw's very Northern England accent compared to the London accent or some of the other.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, I don't even know what his true accent is, because I think he trained it out of himself. But that's what I'm saying. That's why their level is so high, because they're able to get rid of their accent or suppress their accent to play somebody else. And
You the original Lost in Space, Jonathan Harris, Dr. Smith.
yes.
Oh, my dear boy, I believe. Yeah. Well, he grew up in the Bronx and had a very Bronx accent, but was so influenced by the theater when he was a young kid growing up in the 40s and 30s, that he's like, oh no, that's how people in theatrics speak. So he cultivated this very erudite accent. But the reality was, he was, Leo Putz from the Bronx or whatever.
Well, it's like the most interesting man in the world, Dos Equis. He has a total New York accent, like Brooklyn or wherever he's from, and he's able to do that.
Sure.
But
or Pat Morita leaning into his Japanese broken English accent as Mr. Miyagi and Arnold on Happy Days, and the guy was this South California, hey man, how you doing? Or even David Ogden Steyer's Charles Emerson Winchester on MASH, he had a real Southern California accent and stuff. You don't know.
Yeah. Well, my dad too. Like my dad, he was offered. He was, he was around when radio was really big. So actually, he was offered a radio job in high school or something, but he didn't take it.
Oh,
But
wow.
he said back then people would go through speech classes because he said he would drop the last consonants of certain words. And when I knew him, he never did that. He spoke very clearly. So I think a lot of
That's
people went
cool.
through this training.
You remember Studs Terkel, the
Yeah.
wonderful writer, oral history.
Yeah, was that his real accent?
Oh, absolutely. And he would get hired for radio because he sounded like a gangster. And it would do all the soap operas. There would be gangsters on these soap operas
That's cool.
in the 30s and 40s, and was in radio. And actually, my brother-in-law's grandmother was because Chicago in the old time radio days of radio drama, Chicago was kind of the place for soap operas, daytime radio that was nationally broadcast, but originated in Chicago. And his grandmother was a big actress on soap operas and stuff. So
Well,
yeah,
another thing,
it's interesting.
well, see, one thing is what I've learned in my older age now, and I've heard more like corporate meetings in different sources from different sources, is a lot of the women who make a lot of money, they conduct the meetings, and I'm in charge of such and such department, and I'd like you to do this, and I make really good money, but I
Like
end
everything's a
all my sentences
question?
with a question because I'm afraid to be more pushy because they hired me because I talk a certain way. And this is what they expect women to talk like. And at WGN, I went on the air. My boss was giving me feedback about not just the air stuff, but also the recorded stuff I did. And he said, look, you're there. You know what you're talking about. You got to. I'm like, whoa, dude, this is like so opposite of what they expect women to be. Because even the women on TV, they're like this. And like they wear these outfits. And like I'm reporting from a country fair. And I'm wearing like a little tank top that's like very low cut. And I'm like, I went to school, but I'm doing this report and I'm a news person. Okay.
Oh,
But
yeah.
in radio, like what I'm told is I'm not supposed to be like that.
Right. No, I'll be honest. You're saying women. I remember being at a Starbucks with my two nephews and my sister, and we were overhearing a conversation from a guy that was talking, and I'm like, listen, every sentence ends with a question, whether it's meant to or not. So no, and I hear what you're saying, and you're right. As oh God, from the Eagles, Dirty Laundry, not Glenn Fry, the other guy that's still alive. I can't think of his name, but
Yeah.
he did that song about broadcast TV, and he said, you got the bubble-headed bleach blonde, she comes on at 5. She'll tell you
Right.
about the plane crash with a gleam in her eye. And it's
Right.
like, yeah, God, when I can't.
Well, not all they're not all like that. I'm looking it up.
No, of
Dirty
course
Laundry.
not. Of course not.
Yeah, what was his name? I'm looking it up now. Shoot. Okay. I'm trying to find it now. Don Henley?
Don Henley, exactly. Thank
Okay.
you. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, it's a fair editorial comment that a lot
But
of,
I don't know. It's like, okay, but I don't know what's happened, like even in corporate world, because I know people who, I hear these meetings and they're in charge of maybe like the regional, and I'd like you to do this, John. And if you could do this, I'd really appreciate it because we have to get it out tomorrow. And I don't know why they hired me instead of somebody who speaks more strongly because I'm leading people, but maybe they're afraid.
I hear you, buddy. And yeah,
Like,
it's
whoa, you're
well,
leading a meeting? Hello.
I don't know. I guess it's a subconscious,
Or vocal fry. Yeah, so I really like this to happen. And I'm going to get it out tomorrow, but we need to send this email out.
Well, again, you and I have seen, and you're right. I don't think it's just in broadcasting. I think it is in corporate in general, where a lot of pretty people will get advancement. And I'm sure there's a subconscious level of, oh, that's a pretty person. I'm in tune with them, or I'm paying attention to them because of their obvious physical attributes. And
or just like the vocal fry, because maybe the people in charge, they don't want to hire, like they don't have to be pretty, but they're more meek, and maybe if they speak stronger, they won't get the job. Or
well, that's true. That's true from a female standpoint. If you come off too aggressive, then you're a bitch. You're not. Right. You may not be taken seriously, and that's ridiculous. And Julie Mann, our
I was thinking exactly of her, Julie Mann.
Julie
and actually,
Mann
when I interviewed her for the INBA, very popular podcast. she never spoke like that. I'm like, thank God I've got a boss who does not speak in
No.
vocal fry or going up after every sentence.
She commands respect and
Yeah.
and proves it in her actions and in the way she conducted herself. 100%. One of the absolute people.
But wait, first of all, let's
that I
explain who she is.
tremendously
Julie Mann was the news director at WBBM, which is one of the top stations in the entire nation,
Right.
top 10 station in the country. And now she's now she works for Kane County.
Oh, I didn't know that's where she went. That's great. No, she was a serious journalist. And I've worked, and I won't name the examples that follow what you're saying about pretty people that really whatever and don't want to offend. And they were horrible managers. And again, but they were pretty people in these cases, even though they were on radio. But again, maybe go, I'm going to hire her because she's again, she's attractive, and attractive people do get that initial sense of some sort of connection, but also because it's easier for them. I do believe that there was a statement that ended in a question, because it's easier for them. I believe that they don't get the social lessons that we do. And forgive me for including you in my belief.
Include me. I was,
all right, fine.
believe me,
not
trail
being
of
part of the
tears for
beautiful,
me.
not
Trail
being
of
part of the
tears.
beautiful people. We have to work harder
Yeah.
and show that beyond whatever surface attributes or lack thereof that we have, that there's substance behind our words, that we think about what we believe, and we talk about those things. So, and that's why, like I mentioned her earlier, Selene Thomas, my friend who works with Frank Miller, and she's like, I love what you do. And I'm like, that means so much, because again, I am not on the cover of GQ. I should not be an influencer on Instagram or TikTok. I'd like to think that what I say and how I comport myself engenders a trust and appreciation for what I do. It's not a mass appeal product, but when the people that do that, I respect their work and they respect what I do, that means a lot.
Well, I mean, like today, I was watching a newscast, and the woman looked totally normal, because I think she got in when she was judged for her capabilities. She's pretty, but she wasn't like dumb. She was pretty, but fine. And then the guy, though, looks like he could lose like 50 pounds. So is anybody giving him a hard time? Where's his look? Oh, and I was saying this to a coworker the other day. I said, how come the guys aren't told to dress like that pastor? Remember that pastor who was caught at Hillsong? Hillsong was this international church. It still is. And this one pastor was, he was cheating on his wife, and he dressed like super sexy. Like a lot of guys don't dress like him.
Well, I gotta look this guy. I want to look this guy up just out of curiosity.
Okay.
But no, yeah. You're right. No, you're.
And I told my coworker, I'm like, wait, so how come the guys on TV are not dressing like that pastor was, super hot, but the women are wearing the low cut, no sleeves? And I'm thinking, is somebody telling them to dress like that? Or
not to generalize, but I always love locally here in Chicago when it's New Year's Eve and they have like the local coverage of New Year's Eve, and you see a lot of news reporters and anchors, and they're dressed to the nines, and they're dressed for clubbing. They are not dressed to
in Miami, they are, first of all, they're excellent reporters, because I watched Miami stuff when the former president was being indicted.
Okay.
They looked incredible. They sounded incredible. They did an excellent job, very professional and pleasant to look at.
Okay.
So
that's funny. One of my friend's daughters made her mark in Florida. Oh, I forget what specific Florida city. And now she works for a nonprofit organization. Still very young. Could have probably stayed in broadcast television. But yeah, she's great. And no, lovely young woman and stuff. But again, brings substance. Lauren Jiggets, Dan Jiggets.
Oh, she's really good.
She's tremendous and is a lovely woman.
Yeah.
Regardless of that, her dad was a very strong television broadcaster for decades and radio broadcaster. I'm sure he influenced how she comports herself. And she's very pretty, but also incredibly smart and capable. And that's terrific.
Which brings us to 7 of 9.
Jerry Ryan.
You and I often talk about, because
absolutely
7 of 9, of course, looks perfect, but she's such a great actor, and she has so much substance, so much intellect, and she's oblivious to how incredible she looks. And I
don't know about that, but go on. It's okay.
Oh, you think she knows her power?
Oh, I think she's aware of how pretty she is compared to. I mean, because she really is a 1%er as far as good looks go.
Yeah.
And even now in her mid-50s is still.
Oh no, I'm talking about the character.
Oh, I see. Oh, I see. Because
The character 7 of 9. Yeah.
Ryan. No, and you're right. Well, again, she was a drone of this society that only was interested in, again, like a hive mentality. So yeah, and then just comes out and now has to accept her human side, and is probably oblivious of how aesthetically perfect she was. I mean, my God, and they put her in that ridiculous cat suit on Voyager that was so uncomfortable and also like impossible to go to the bathroom while wearing that thing, and also was really giving her really bad back problems because it was just so constricting. And no, again, it's interesting. And I forgive me for making it more about the actress, but I feel for Jerry Ryan because she was so ridiculous, and still is so ridiculously beautiful. She had a real serious stalker problem of many people.
And she doesn't anymore, or?
I have no idea. I just know that she, and it really still doesn't do a lot of conventions, but I saw her at San Diego 6 years ago doing a Star Trek panel, and was at San Diego. So was putting herself out there publicly, but and she's been in the new Star Trek Picard series for all 3 seasons. No, I think, and again, as in her 50s now, but it's interesting because she was also married to the former state senator Jack Ryan, and actually my sister and my brother-in-law, my brother-in-law's friends with Jack, and so they had dinner a few times, and it was just so funny to hear my sister go, I met this woman, very pretty, and she's on Star Trek. Her name's like Seven, and I'm like, Jerry Ryan, 7 of 9. Yeah. Jack's wife. And I'm like, yeah, Jack's wife is kind of popular. Yeah. I don't know how to break it to you. She's pretty big.
But I mean, that's an example of somebody who, like I said, she's aesthetically appealing, which I don't care about, but she's so smart, the character.
Yes.
She's so smart in everything.
Well, and again, that's a credit to the actor and the writing. But I think Jerry Ryan has proved herself. She used to be on Billions, the Showtime show as well, and a few other shows over the years. No, she's a really, really good actress.
So see, that's what I want to see. Like, as I want to see more people like that, because then they have depth instead of like, was this person hired because they look good in a bathing suit? I have no idea.
I hope Jennifer Lawrence ages into a Jerry Ryan type of actor that beyond her beauty can still bring, because I do think that Jennifer Lawrence is a very good actor and obviously still very young and beautiful, but I think the potential is there. I think Anne Hathaway has that potential. Trying to think of
did you see Anne Hathaway? Did you see The Intern, that movie? It's a silly movie, but it's really
good. Sure. Yeah,
she was really good in that.
Yeah, she is good in that. No, I mean, that's the thing. It's like, it is nice when you get beyond the aesthetic of the beauty. Like, is there substance behind it? And there is, and in a lot of cases, and that's good. I mean, I don't know what else.
Well, you know that show, The OC. It's an old show, but okay. So I started watching it because somebody told me, or I read online also. They said it is like the first season is like perfect television. So I got the first season, and it is. It's amazing television, and of course everybody's beautiful. And I remember one of the casting people from many years ago, they said, look, I have no problem putting beautiful people on TV. And I know what they're talking about, because when you're just living your regular life and you watch TV or watch a movie, it's sort of escapist to look at beautiful people. But I want those beautiful people to be able to act and to have good writing for them. Then I will buy into the whole thing.
Agreed. Well, that's my problem with a lot of reality TV. Jersey Shore, they have very pretty people on there, but they're all airheads. And some people
I think that's the point. Funny. Yeah,
What's
that's the point. I think that's the point. That's why.
Yes and no. You're right. But also other, like Big Brother or whatever. Yeah. And you got the hot person, but are they going to do anything beyond Big Brother? One of my good friends, Judd Winnick, and his wife Pam, and I forget Pam's maiden name, but they're married now. They were on The Real World San Francisco, the 3rd season. And that was the season with poor Pedro, who had HIV on the show and ultimately passed away from HIV, and also had this real jerk character.
So AIDS, at that point it was AIDS, because HIV is when you actually have.
Oh, excuse me. Then he died of AIDS. Yes. Yes. Thank you. But like Pam and Judd were on this show, and as Judd, I mean, I didn't care about the real world, but I mean, I knew Judd was a cartoonist and became a very successful cartoonist, and it's like, wow, my friend who had this like moment where he was as famous as the Friends cast, because literally, as he said, one week the Friends people were on the cover of Entertainment Weekly, the next week we were.
Wow.
And that MTV generation absolutely knew all these people.
Yeah.
And Judd had an opportunity to continue to milk that reality TV notoriety on other things. And he said, I did one thing, I felt so icky doing it. And he did it with his wife, Pam. And they're like, that's it, we're not doing it anymore. And thankfully, then they went into, along with their professional careers, Pam is a medical career person and Judd is a cartoonist and successful writer. But they really got, because of Pedro, because Judd and Pedro were really close, as was Pam, they do AIDS awareness for public schools and stuff and talk to kids.
Wow.
Great people. And but it is like, they're like, Judd is my lab rat of what was it like being a reality superstar, and then walking away from it and now being an ordinary person again. It's very interesting.
So what's it like?
Well, he's fine because, again, he doesn't care about it. He's doing his own thing. Pam's doing her own thing. And I wonder how many of these social influencers on TikTok and Instagram, what life will be like when age catches up to them. It'll happen to everybody. And eventually you're not going to be the pretty person that you want to see in spandex holding the energy drink.
We'll know that in like 10 years. I mean, I'd like to know, too, because I mean, it happened. We've seen it in Hollywood where somebody had a very great career and then they went down and then they became a wreck or they had a hard time adjusting.
Well, I mean, I don't think like a good example of that who's put herself out publicly since is Justine Bateman, who was Mallory on Family Ties, Michael J. Fox's sister, a beautiful young woman. Well, age is and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, but, she hasn't aged gracefully like a Sally Field has, let's say. From Gidget to now.
But she's also owning it, though, isn't she?
She absolutely is owning it and is pointing it out. Or the guy, it wasn't Lisa Bonet that he was married to on the Cosby Show. It was the older sister. I can't even remember his character's name. He works at Whole Foods now. He's not an actor anymore.
Oh, yeah. Did he do that by choice or?
No, I think it was by reality where he wasn't getting cast. And it's like, all right, well, I got to make money.
Right.
I mean, and that's the thing, man. No, and there are plenty of former actors that now are doing whatever they can to make ends meet.
Jeffrey Owens.
There you go. Yeah, I forget his character's name. Alvin. He was Alvin on the Cosby Show.
Okay.
And he was funny because he was a good counterweight and was like a younger generation where he didn't always agree with Cosby's character and stuff. And of course, now the Cosby Show is its own controversy.
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. What are you going to do?
Yeah, I'm just looking here because I remember he started reminding me of people I went to school with, who I grew up with.
Oh, that's funny.
Oh yeah. Okay.
There's an actress, Jewel State, who did Firefly and also did Stargate Atlantis. And I remember being at a convention and I watched Stargate Atlantis, but I was
I love Stargate and I love Stargate Atlantis.
Oh, there you go. She was I can't think of her character's name, but she was on Stargate Atlantis. But I'm in the lobby reading a magazine, so is she. And I keep looking up and I'm looking, and then she noticed me looking at her and she just started smiling. And I said, "Forgive me, do I know you?" And she said, "Well, I'm on TV." Or I was on TV. And I'm like, "What'd you do?" She goes, "Well, Firefly." And I'm like, "Yeah, I didn't watch Firefly." She goes, "Stargate Atlantis." I'm like, "I remember you. Absolutely." I go, "What's your name?" Jewel State. "Oh, so nice to meet you." I'm like, she's like, "It happens all the time. I'll get stopped in airports."
And where'd you see her?
We were at a nerd convention, but we were in a hotel lobby before the show.
Okay.
And it's like, she goes, "I get stopped all the time. Didn't we go to high school together? Didn't I know you in college or whatever?"
That's true.
And yeah, I mean, it's some of these supporting actors, you don't think you remember them, but they're stuck in your subconscious. And it's like, oh yeah, it's that. I was just telling my friend that when I covered boxing, I was at Madison Square Garden, and this is in the 90s, and I met Liam Neeson and Aidan Quinn, the actors. And they were just, I mean, it was before Taken and before The Phantom Menace, as far as Liam Neeson. It was after Desperately Seeking Susan, as far as Aidan Quinn, but it was before his show Elementary. and they're just working actors, and they're Irish guys too. And we were there for a boxing match, and I'm like, what are you guys doing here? They're like, well, we're big boxing fans.
Wow.
And yeah, we were in the green room where all the celebrities and the reporters were. But yeah, it's just like, hey, look, it's Aidan Quinn and it's Liam Neeson.
I mean, I've read some articles about people who are influencers on social media, and they feel like a lot of stress and anxiety, but we really haven't seen the fallout. We really haven't seen the after yet.
Right. Because we're still in the midst of the phenomena happening now. There's a really good, I don't know if it's still on Max, but it ran on HBO as a documentary about this wall in LA that's a pink wall. And a lot of social influencers will take photos there holding their energy drink or whatever. And it focused on these 4 influencers, what life is like for them and everything else. I couldn't stomach watching it for more than 20 minutes because I didn't care about these people. But just like you said, it's going to be interesting when they get into their 30s, maybe 40s, where they're not the pretty people they used to be. I mean, Denise Austin, you remember, the big aerobics star.
Oh yeah.
I mean, she's like 65. She still looks pretty much like she did 30 years ago or 40 years ago. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah, but it's like that with people in life. Like, I mean, of course, you're going to go back to your high school reunion soon. I've gone back to mine, and some of the people don't look the same. I have to like sort of focus in. But you know what? It's if they mind or not, because some people, they're like, whatever, they're like enjoying life, and some people are. I think it's if your success is based on how you look.
100%.
Then
Absolutely. No, it's God. I just posted, and I might have mentioned earlier in the conversation, Julie Newmar, 90 years old. And she's got this publicity photo that she's put out as her official 90th birthday photo. She is amazing looking still.
Oh, yeah, I'm sure.
She still has that dancer's body and has really taken care of herself. I have no idea if she had work done or not, but I do know that going back to the 50s through the 90s still was lovely. And
I see an older picture. Yeah, she looks good. I mean, of course she looks like an older woman, but that's expected. She looks like, it looks like she's had some fillers, but whatever, who cares? It's like whatever people want to do.
Yeah, her skin looks great for not 89. You know, again, today's her birthday, 90. But yeah, God bless her, man. No, and again, and she's even had children. So it's
obviously if she's still alive and doing well at 90, then she's done something right. So
yeah. Well, and again, I think that dancer's regimen, as far as staying in shape, I think she maintains it as best as she can, having been in her late 80s and now 90 and stuff. But yeah, no, Dick Van Dyke. Look at Dick Van Dyke, 95
Oh yeah,
years old.
he's very healthy, yeah.
Well, and again, he even made a video with his current wife where he's dancing around, and the song is called Keep Moving. And that's kind of his like mantra.
Oh, he's been working out for years, yeah.
Yeah, to the elderly. Well, just do something to stay physically active. Do not get, stationary and everything. So
that's true. Yeah. Okay. Now, well, thank you for listening to my imitation of people who speak with, because I often like, I listen to this stuff. It's not radio, because radio, like I know there are a variety of people, and there are a lot of women who sound fantastic on the air. It's more like the general culture. And I know people have written articles about this, about the vocal fry, about the ending the sentences with a question. And so I was just delivering an example. So, okay.
I hear you though, Margaret, you're right. And then again, sadly, it's not just women. I know young men that speak that way too. And I don't understand why they
I think it's because people want to make peace. They're aware of who they're speaking. I think it's like they don't want to be brash, and so they want to be, they want to work together.
Yeah, not offensive. No, I hear you. Martin Short, when he does Ed Grimley, has that. I like slides. So, and I've even heard him talk about discovering his Ed Grimley persona, and he knew a guy in high school that would always end on a question as far as the way he spoke. So yeah, what are you gonna do?
I think it's because also, this is what is sort of contradictory about our culture is they'll say, be yourself. But then there's this kind of cultural standard. And now the cultural standard is we do not like straightforward style. We like the questions at the end. We like the soft touches. So it's like, because if you're a person who's straightforward and you're not being offensive in your speaking, then can you be yourself? So
I hear you. My voice, I suppose subconsciously, I cultivated my voice as it changed when I was a teenager to speak the way that I do now. That said, I went through that very thing of being in demand for voiceovers, and then in the late 90s, early 2000s was told by the various advertising agencies here, they're like, you don't sound natural. And I'm like, but this is my natural voice.
Wow.
They're like,
Okay.
well, we want people that sound more like regular people. And it's like, okay.
Well, it's true because I've talked to you on the phone for hours, and that's how you sound. You're this is not your persona.
No, it isn't. And then again, I know when I was a teenager and my voice was changing, that I paid very much attention to the broadcasters whose voices I respected. And like I said, I do think I kind of leaned into, I mean, I have a deep voice to start, so that helps. And also as I've gotten older, the voice has gotten lower. But yeah, and I also think that I'm careful with my word choices, things like that. Not afraid of $10 words to use them, or whatever.
Oh, that's true.
I'll admit that.
$10 words.
But again, the English language is a big, rich language. I don't want to just stick with, whatever, over by there. And again, my dad was in over by there, Chicago.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Oh, 100%. Hey, close the lights, all right? Nobody's in that room.
Lights.
I love close the lights. That's my favorite Chicago idiom. Not turn the lights off, close the lights. I don't know if that's back in the days when it was oil lamps. I know my dad, my grandfather,
Oh my gosh, you're
came here in the
right.
early 1900s, and they had one of those cold water apartments and stuff. So they had a payphone in their house, and the phone company would come and empty all the nickels and stuff.
Wow.
Well, and again, man, this is during the Depression, during the 30s.
But yeah, I didn't think about close the lights. You're right. It comes from the turning down the wick or whatever.
That's my assumption. Yeah. I mean,
okay.
But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I wish my poor father, he passed away 40 years ago, early 80s. And I really do wish that he only got a glimpse of what I was doing in high school as far as broadcasting. And he was excited for me, but I am bummed that he didn't get a chance to see the 30 years I got to spend in Chicago radio.
Yeah, that's true.
What are you going to do? Anyway.
Okay, well,
we could wrap.
Let's end here because it's only been 3 hours. This is like this. I think this is the longest thing I've done because when I interviewed the woman who Donna Halpern who discovered Rush, she's the one who brought Rush to America through Cleveland radio.
Cool.
And I think the interview with her was 2 hours or more than an hour and a half or something. I think this is beyond that. So
well, I'm sorry that I'm not a more impressive guest, because that's certainly a very impressive thing to bring Rush to America. All I've done is talk about why I like Superman more than Spider-Man and things like that.
Yeah. No, but it's good for people to know anyway, just for the record, that the digital, I mean, there's more we can talk about it too. We should be on a panel or whatever, but there's more. But I think it's understandable that, people have to understand that all the stuff that they're doing today, that they're patting themselves on the back with, there's a precedent, and it's a precedent even before us. There's 100%. A precedent going back to the beginning of the 19th century or whatever, or no, I'm sorry, 20th century, 19th
Absolutely.
century.
No, your Gutenberg example, even at the beginning of the conversation, I think is apt.
Oh yeah. Anyway, it's funny because he was just like doing his, first of all, it's very hard to find information about him. And also he was just a businessman. He's like, oh wait, I'm doing this religion things. Oh, I can take this kind of technology and I can do it for books. And it was a slow thing. And then of course it spread through Europe, and then we know what happened after there.
Absolutely.
And he was just a guy. Like he wasn't he was not a special kind of,
but a lot of brilliant ideas are just a crazy wild hair thought. Yeah. That somebody has that someone else had never thought of before or applied it. Maybe they had the thought, but just never applied it to whatever. And I think that's kind of what happened with podcasting. I really think that it was just, I've got this skill that works on broadcasting, but I kind of want to do my own thing. And now the internet exists. Let me put my message here, because I like Adam Curry on MTV. They wouldn't let him do a lot of what he ended up doing podcasting wise. He just shifted. It's funny in nerd circles, some people call me the Podfather, and I'm like, no way. I'm like, again, Adam Curry's the Podfather.
Wait, man. So he does what does he do? What's his whole thing?
He just podcasts, and he podcasts. A lot of his stuff is technical, but also a lot of his stuff is just slice of life, what's going on.
So it's a general thing. It's him.
It's just a general talk show, and he has guests on and stuff. Brilliant man. And again,
because I only started because during my Trail of Tears, as I call it, my radio career, I wasn't getting a break. And then I started doing podcasting. But the thing is, luckily, again, it's WGN. Thank you for WGN. You guys are awesome. What happened was the program director, Kevin Matheny, he just didn't care what we did in our free time. So I would just use the studio and mess with audio and stuff and figure out what to do. And I felt like I got that opportunity because there was enough space to do it.
Sure.
And a lot of people weren't doing it. And I really wanted to get my stuff out there and interview people. So
That's exactly what happened with me. My first podcasts were using the facilities at Sporting News Radio, using their studios and whatever. And in fact, the day that I got fired, I had planned an interview with my friend Walt Simonson, who was famous for doing the Star Wars comic book. And the two program directors that were sympathetic to me, I'm like, hey, can I still use the studio tonight? I have this interview set up. And they're like, of course, no problem. Again, it was just business. They were moving the network from Chicago to Dallas. So they fired like 99% of the staff, and we're going to hire people in Dallas. They only kept even a couple radio personalities with the move. And so I hear you. That's kind of what happened with me. I started WordBalloon while I was at Sporting News Radio. If I may, real fast, Paul Allen, the Microsoft billionaire, owned Sporting News Radio. He owned the Seahawks, and I want to say the Sonics in Seattle as well, the sports franchises. And he was one of the Microsoft billionaires, was a close friend of Bill Gates, took his Microsoft money and got into sports. He also created the Science Fiction Museum in Seattle. And in that classic internet startup company mentality, the bosses were always like, hey, if you got an interesting idea for us, run up the flagpole, email someone.
Cool.
So I did. And I said, hey, I know you got the Science Fiction Museum and you're doing this comic book thing at the museum. Would you be interested in a science fiction talk show to promote the museum and do this? And they're like, no, we're not interested, but that's a great idea. You should do it on your own. Thank you, Paul Allen and company.
Oh, yeah.
Because that's how WordBalloon started.
That's cool.
Yeah. Anyway.
And I think a lot of stuff, it's called early adopters. I think a lot of people
100%.
do that. They see some technology out there and they're like, hey, I'm going to do it. It's sort of like early radio. There were these guys on ships or whatever. And it was some of the early hobbyists, I should say.
Yes.
I mean, the ship thing was official, but then there are these other people who are hobbyists. And then,
right. No, and again, that's the same thing with podcasting. It was just like, hey, we can do this. And like I said, so many of us were inspired by that Wire magazine article from February of 2005. I started 3 months later, May of 2005. And a lot of my friends who were first-year adopters, as far as doing comic book stuff, they were all inspired by that magazine article as well. And here we are.
Okay, so my thing is, I wasn't in radio yet, but I was really into blogging because that was my thing, and ghostwriting and stuff. So
yeah. Okay,
well, I'm gonna stop this now, and then I'm gonna do something that's very rare. I think I'm going to maybe post the. I think I'm going to post the unedited version.